Fable 2 is a great game, but the story that goes with it is much more difficult to discuss. If that wasn't true, this video wouldn't be so long. Just like the gameplay, there are parts of this story that are thoroughly excellent. Things like the characters we get to know, the places we explore, and the lore behind it all. But there are some parts of this narrative that are so terrible that, when considering both the good and the bad, it's impossible to give a fair assessment of the story in brief. So I wanted to make sure that every part of this narrative, every character and plot beat, every weak contrivance and every moment of engaging conflict, all of it is covered. Because the best parts of this story deserve to be highlighted and celebrated at great length. But there's no world in which those strengths are enough to overlook the story's many crippling weaknesses. But this is still Fable. Whatever happens in the story, that never changes how fun and enjoyable every single moment of this game is. Enjoyable enough to nearly, but not quite, overlook some crippling narrative flaws, which we will get into, and in great detail. Fable is a game that's carried by its charm and its personality. It's quirky and odd, sometimes in a way that feels entirely British, but not always. No NPC ever holds back, whether they love or hate you, but they'll always dance with you. Bandits comment on their allies' deaths, adding humour and levity to every fight.
Oh well, never liked him anyway.
The same way that seeing a hob flee was always funny, especially when they throw themselves over cliffs with absolutely no abandon. The combat is engaging, the magic looks and feels awesome. Enemies are fun, if not varied. The minigames are fine. The economy is a great addition that brings a lot of depth to a playthrough. Albion is perpetually a joy to explore. The dog is a natural extension of the story, gameplay and protagonist. The game is gorgeous and wonderful, and its mechanics and social system are still enjoyable hours into a playthrough. The game has so many great characters, the 3 heroes you collect all have plenty of personality, bringing something unique to the game. For all 3 minutes Reavers in it, anyway. The world expands in ways that make it exciting to explore, seeing a side of Albion that's beautiful and uplifting, and then the exact opposite, how dark it can get or how dark parts of it have become. The lore is some of the highlights of the game. The Tattered Spire is fascinating, and learning more about the Old Kingdom is always welcome. But once we're past the opening, the narrative does so little to make the story mean anything to the player character. The game has no real antagonists. Lucien gives us a strong reason to want to kill him at the beginning of the game, but that motivation never develops. Lucien himself never changes or pressures the hero in any real way. He objectively achieves something incredible, but that all happens off screen, which is where he spends most of his time too. The game has a solid objective following the main task of collecting the 3 heroes, but that rarely surprises us and almost never challenges us. It gives us some phenomenal character moments that we'll get to, but those are few and far between, and while they make for interesting story beats in the moment, once they're resolved, they're generally resolved for good. In fact, writing the script, I can only think of 2 engaging character moments throughout the whole game. Maybe 3. Even Teresa isn't saved. I love Teresa in Fable 1, as absent as she is. Her characterization, setup, her ending, that's all solid. But here she's just relegated to a faceless mouthpiece delivering boring exposition. Even if casting Zoe Wanamaker was an inspired decision, one of the best casting choices in the series. Teresa rarely says anything interesting, but damn does she sound good while she's doing it. Which isn't to say this story is bad. It's not bad, sometimes it's incredible. It gets us out and into the world, it gets us to meeting some memorable characters, and it's fun. But it does not do a single thing to bring the hero into the narrative, not in any meaningful way. It gives us a strong and emotionally resonant reason to seek revenge, then does nothing more with that motivation until the very end of the game. So that's where the story lands. Parts of it are excellent, other parts are bad, so the overall narrative lands somewhere in the middle. Like I said at the start though, the good deserves divulging just as much as the bad, so I'm not only going to focus on the negatives. I want to highlight and talk about the many greats just as much as the bad, so let's get into it. As always, my aim with these videos is to examine the narrative and the story, analysing the characters and plot without going into detail about the mechanics, design or gameplay, unless those directly influence the story. This is a long video, and if you want to watch it in parts, there are chapters in the description to break the video up. Lastly, for those who haven't yet played Fable 2, major spoilers from the very beginning.
I wish. I wish.
Castle Fairfax dominates your eyeline as you start the game, the first of 2 towers that will go on to define the game and the hero's life. You see yourself holed up on a snowy winter evening with your older sister, Rose, and yours and her dream of one day finding yourselves in Castle Fairfax, with all the warmth and food you'd ever need. Rose, bless her, is also nice and sympathetic to Lucien, letting us know he recently lost his wife and daughter. Hearing a nearby crowd, Rose and Sparrow were drawn to a trader and, specifically, an old music box said to be from the Old Kingdom and capable of granting 1 wish. With a desire to get into Castle Fairfax already made clear, a blind woman convinces them to put the money together to buy the box. Honestly, say anything about Fable 2, but casting Zoe Wanamaker as Teresa is perfect. I really like Teresa's voice acting in Fable 1, but for an older and more experienced Teresa, Wanamaker was 100% the way to go. We'll get into Teresa later, but it's important to note she's been relegated to mostly just tutorials and exposition, but at least we get to hear this voice through all that. She also doesn't tell us if a box will work, only that for 5 gold we can have our answer. And it's good to know that 500 years hasn't changed Teresa in the slightest. She's still as good at withholding important information from this hero as she was from her brother, even though she almost definitely knows everything that's going to happen. So, 5 gold coins for the music box. We agree to grab 5 warrants for a guard and pose with Rose so Barnum can take a picture. We save a dog from a gang of teenagers beating up the bully after he outright nuts Rose in the face. We're asked to kill some beetles in a warehouse, but we're also given the choice to destroy a number of crates, starting us on our journey towards a good or evil alignment. And a man asks you to deliver a letter to a young woman, which we of course give to her mum because James Corden doesn't deserve happiness. With the 5 gold secured and one of the best jokes in Fable 2 out of the way,
For as long as you look into it, it will make you beautiful. Very wise. Now, just remember, the magic only works if you look at it in complete darkness.
we take the music box to our spot overlooking Bowerstone City and our view of Castle Fairfax. After making our wish, the music box makes a huge amount of fanfare and ruckus, rising, glowing, changing colour, then, without further aplomb, disappears. Nothing changes. Bummed out, but unsurprised, Rose and Sparrow return to their shack to find the dog that Sparrow saved waiting for them, and though he's told to git, he sticks around. With the day done, spoiled by our raised hopes amounting to nothing, we fall asleep. Only to be woken by a guard inviting us to Fairfax Castle. Your wish did come true. At the castle you meet Jeeves, who lays down the ground rules of your meeting with Lucien, to not mention his recently passed wife or daughter, to keep our manners in check, the usual. We pass a man named as Master Garth on the way in. Lucien had heard there was a trader selling the music box, and he quickly clarifies his interest was not the music box itself, but that the two of us were able to activate it. He asks us to both stand on a pedestal recognisable as the Hero Guild seal, and which reacts to the two of us. Things take a dark turn. Lucien drops the affable facade, the seal on which we're trapped turns blood red, causing Lucien to ask,
What are you?
because we're not just heroes, we're descendants of Archon, and this is a great reference to that fact. Lucien rambles and we make out, you're a hero but you're not one of the three. He draws a pistol, apologising, and shoots Rose. With a second apology, like he almost means it, he turns the gun on you and shoots you too. This cutscene is cool as hell. You get blown out of a window by the force of a shot, falling out of a tower, tumbling down to the ground so far below. Fable 2 makes an interesting choice here, permanently killing off your character at the end of a prologue, and the game ends before— Wait, you survive this? Sure, this is explained in the game that you're kept alive by both your grief and your hero's lineage, and we have no choice but to accept this, but get out. This is a child, maybe 8 or 9 years old, who was shot at point-blank range, defenestrated, and then drops 100 feet out of a tower. The roof doesn't even stop their fall, it's the first collision before smashing into the ground, on top of a gunshot. We know how tall this tower is too, not just from this cutscene, but because we see this tower in the game itself. There's no other point in the game that asks you to suspend your disbelief this hard, even though in this game you are functionally immortal. That does soften the blow of having to believe they survived. This becomes mechanical later in the game. You can't die, you just get scarred, so that makes it better. This isn't just plot armor given to the character in a cutscene. Except that's worse because it means you have plot armor the entire game. You just can't die. You can't die. And I can buy being saved by our heroic lineage, even though the hero of Oakvale 500 years closer to Archon could die. But if we can survive a gunshot wound and a fall, why can't our sister, who the game just made clear was also a hero, survive just a gunshot wound? She dies immediately. Our grief keeps us alive? You mean anyone who's sad enough in this universe will never die? What are you talking about, Fable? Everyone who dies in this world just didn't miss their loved ones enough to feel too sad to survive? Ultimately, I can get on board with this, and not only just because the game doesn't give me a choice. This is the protagonist, which doesn't mean they can't die, but it does mean they're more than most people. That's how the majority of video game protagonists work. This is just too much. This is too much of a suspension of belief. Being shot and thrown out of a window, fine, maybe. I can buy surviving that. This fall, even without a gunshot wound, is immediate death. Both together, and no. Breathe out. Actually, breathe in. This game has a jump feature. You can jump over ledges, but if a jump is too high, there's no prompt. Even though the first thing the game set up is that we can survive infinite fall damage. Fable, you don't get to have this, but make these drops too high to survive. That's bullshit. Okay, now I am done.
Good, even.
This is, unwarranted immortality aside, a brilliant opening. It immediately sets up the antagonist, gives us a very personal and real reason to want our revenge, and doesn't shy away from seeing our sister murdered. We have a reason to kill Lucien long before we find out anything related to the Spire. It's a strong start for the game and narrative to immediately show who we're going to be fighting and why. We know who the antagonist is from the opening, with a direct need to stop him from a get-go, and all of our decisions are made to enact revenge against him for what he did to you and your sister as children. Lucien gives us an immediate and, more important, an emotional buy-in before even the beginning of a full game, and he fits Sparrow's journey perfectly, which is always true. I'm going to come down hard on Lucien, but he is the perfect antagonist for Sparrow. The problem with Lucien is never what we see, because that is always excellent and it makes him a good villain. The problem is we never get enough. To be clear, we've already had 90% of everything we're going to get from Lucien. I'll dive into Lucien at the end of the game. Our dog is here, and Teresa too, looking out for her descendant and the hero who can stop Lucien. Actually, I just had a thought. This is not what the game intends, and I don't think this is how we're meant to take this chain of events, but Teresa arrives here the moment you land, well, impact. Knowing you will be shot and knowing you will be the one to stop Lucien and stop him using the Spire. Which means Teresa absolutely let Rose die. She told you to get the music box that begins this whole chain of events, knowing you will be invited to Castle Fairfax and that you, and you alone, will survive, down to where to collect your nearly dead body. As with all oracles of this type, I'm sure they're not allowed to directly intervene. It's why she never does anything herself directly, but I just wanted to point this out. Teresa knew. Teresa let this happen.
But the heroes are not all gone. You are here.
We age up, well, the dog doesn't, but the hero does, and are sent out to begin our journey, having been given a seal for the Ancient Heroes Guild by Teresa. We explore through this dungeon, finding books about the hero of Oakvale and about the Tattered Spire. Finding out about the Spire this early is obviously intentional, but it also feels unintentional with the story and with the reveal of what Lucien is attempting. We can find out that the last Archon's wish destroyed the Old Kingdom, or that his wish was to destroy the Old Kingdom, before we get the cutscene where Teresa reveals that to us. We also find out some information about the hero of Oakvale, which I don't think is going to mean much to anyone who hasn't played Fable 1. Finally, we reach our destination, the Chamber of Fate. This is such a fantastic callback to the original game and the hero of Oakvale, with the murals of his life surrounding us. We're separated by 500 years, but this makes it feel as though those events were so integral, such an impactful part of what happened in this world. We feel the weight of the past and of our ancestor. The game mentions the hero of Oakvale here, but I think that's the only time. The game also says we are descended from them, but the bloodline and our lineage to Archon isn't made clear until the ending of the game, unless you've played the first Fable and are aware of his bloodline, which is much more central in that game. A little treat for people who have played the first game and a fun reveal at the end for those who haven't. We also unlock our will abilities here, casting a spell for the first time and finally solidifying our status as hero. If surviving this objectively unsurvivable drop doesn't solidify our status as hero anyway. From the chamber, we're called to meet Teresa at Bowerstone and to use the Cullis Gate to leave. We're quickly called off the road to deal with some bandits led by a captain called Fag and a few prisoners they've kidnapped off the roads. There's not really any story here, mostly this is just the chance to let you loose with all your tools after the tutorial. We fight the bandits, defeat Fag and free the prisoners. However, inside Fact's cabin we can find a letter from someone called Lucien, asking for bandits to capture as many traders as possible. We already know that Lucien is a baddie, and this is just a nice reminder of the sort of person that Lucien is. It's been 10 years and Lucien has only continued down the same path, not just murdering children. Now we can add kidnapping to his repertoire, though it's not clear what for. Arriving in Bowerstone, Teresa lets us know she's going to be late and suggests we do some work to pass the time, so it's minigame time. Eventually Teresa arrives and she can finally get the story and our quest going. She shows us the tattered spire for the first time, still in the early days of its construction, outlining what it is that Lucien is after and what he's risking by pursuing it. We learn that the spire was first built during the Old Kingdom as a conduit to gather all the magic in the world and cast any wish the user desires. The Old Kingdom was destroyed in the process, either as a byproduct of a release of the energy within the spire, or as a direct outcome of a wish itself. This is the power that Lucien is seeking to possess. Lucien also found some documents, apparently, that foretold someone would stop him using the spire. What these documents are, what else they have to say, where they came from, their origin, that's never touched on. He just found out that someone would try and stop him from using the spire, which is why Rose died and why he tried to kill us. Teresa has cards now, like tarot cards, which allude to things that probably will happen, but don't really tell us anything specific. I get it, introducing seer characters can complicate storytelling if you have someone who knows exactly what's going to happen, but can't reveal all of that to the player. In that case, the cards are a pretty good resolution to that problem, keeping the story's secrets while letting us feel we're benefiting from knowing an all-powerful seeress. It's a pretty good balance between the two. The spire is powered by will, which is only found in heroes, and it will take 3 heroes, one representing each hero discipline of strength, will and skill to activate the spire. Finally, Teresa reveals our role in all of this. We are the 4th hero. Though the significance of that isn't explained here, only that we will cause Lucien's downfall. Though we only get to do that because the game says so. We're meant to be the more important hero, more so than the other 3, but we never feel especially important. We don't do anything wildly heroic or notable to recover the 3 heroes. We'll get into that a bit more later. Quick jump to the ending, so ending spoilers. We can channel the powers of the 3 heroes at the end, and it seems that power also allows us to use the spire without having to siphon those powers from the other 3 as Lucien was. But that's sort of it. You could argue that's enough, that the hero of Bower Lake has the conflicts of all 3 heroes in disciplines representing all, which is their greatest power. But that really only matters right at the very end, and doesn't matter at all to get us to that ending. To be fair to the game, that is what Teresa tells us, that we will be the one to stop Lucien using the spire, so the game never promises anything more than what it delivers. It's just a waste that the rest of the story never feels as though it has to be the hero doing any of the events of the game. It could have been almost anyone else and they could still have succeeded in the exact same way you do to recover the 3 heroes. And I hear what you're saying, that it would have taken someone powerful to break into the spire and break Garth out, but yeah, you don't break Garth out, he breaks you out. Being more important because we're related to the hero of Oakvale and descended from the Old Kingdom bloodline also has no impact in this narrative outside of the very few moments the game says it's important. Being the descendant of the 4th hero is what sends Lucien after us, with some vague prophecy he found in a document the game never references again, so that is the one thing that drags us personally into the story. To be clear, it's genuinely fantastic that Lucien immediately gives us a reason to kill him. We immediately learn the sort of man Lucien is, and that there's no line he won't cross to get what he wants, including killing children in cold blood. The way Sparrow and Rose are drawn to Lucien, and the way that pushes you to need to stop him, it's a great incentive that pushes us, and it works at every level to get the protagonist and antagonist at each other. However, because your bloodline doesn't matter at all after Lucien shoots you, not until the very ending, this still feels like a weak conclusion to the narrative that isn't really made relevant outside of those 2 very specific moments. The big problem is that no part of this story is personal to Sparrow. They have no stakes in helping Hannah, grabbing Garth, or retrieving Reaver. Their motivation never goes deeper than revenge against Lucien, and there's never anything personal on the line to lose if they fail. They just don't get to confront Lucien. Of course, the motivation to stop the potential destruction of Albion is worth a small mention. But that's even less personal in itself to not only Sparrow, but everyone else. It's good motivation, but it's very general. Of course, the other characters are great, and they all have their own miniature stories, which go a long way to making this game vibrant and which keep this story afloat. So while Sparrow does nothing impactful, other characters do, and we do a great job of it, which we'll get to. So not only is Sparrow inconsequential to finding the heroes, They never have any real personal interest in doing so past the chance to take a shot at Lucien. So the plot up until the very ending is just a series of checklists that we have to tick to get to that moment, and which mean virtually nothing to Sparrow. I really don't want to make comparisons to Fable 1, but I want to explain this a bit better, and that game demonstrates my point super well. At the start of Fable 1, our sister and mother are taken. In the same way we're told to recover Hannah, we're told our sister may be alive and to find out where she is, a quest that ultimately leads to the hero of Oakvale finding Teresa. The whole quest is so personal to the hero who believed his sister was dead for all these years, and then gets the chance to actively himself go and find her. That's personal to him, it matters. Hannah is a random monk. The hero of Oakvale has the same reason to go and find his mother, Scarlet Robe, with the same emotional stakes of bringing together what family the hero thought were all dead. This leads to us needing to stop Jack of Blades because he's a constant threat to the entire small family. Hannah, Garth and Reva are a means to an end that the story gives us very little emotional stake in. That's clear with how little time we spend with Garth, though we do spend more time with Hannah, to the point that's potentially the best relationship in the game. But that's only expressed in very few select moments. Reva, as I've said, is only in the game for 3 minutes. I don't like making comparisons because I'm not saying that Fable 2 is worse because Fable 1 is better, it's not. This is a weak part of Fable 2 on its own terms. So we're not the real hero of the story until what makes us important is revealed at the very end, and we'll get to that. The other main characters have nothing to do with Sparrow, and you're never given any other motivation to pursue them past your goal of revenge against Lucien, which is not bad. That motivation is solid, and having that be our singular driving force gives it a lot of weight. It just means there's very little that happens in the middle of the story, between Sparrow being shot and between Lucien being shot, that feels in any way impactful or emotionally weighty, or does anything to bring the hero of Bower Lake into the story of these events except then because we're the main character. We can also consider the 3 main heroes' interest in stopping Lucien, Hannah also for revenge against Lucien for her father, Garth has an interesting backstory with Lucien and knows he needs stopping, and Reva won't be taken prisoner by anyone. Those are all interesting, but again, not relevant to Sparrow. I appreciate that's a lot to get into when we're still relatively early in the video, and I'm not going to be dismissing the rest of the story or saying it's all crap, it's not. We are going to get into the many strengths of the story as well. Teresa tells us Lucien's plan to build the spire, that we have to stop him from ever using it. She adds that she had a vision of a ritual in the town of Oakfield, and an individual of incredible strength, sending us to go speak to the abbot there. Our first clue to our first hero awaits, and we leave Bowerstone for Oakfield. Before we leave, though, Teresa told us that Bowerstone had changed since we were here as a child, especially Old Town where Rose and Sparrow grew up. With this provocation, it's worth going to investigate where you used to live and sleep, and if you do, you'll uncover a dig spot and find Rose's diary. These are the moments that do make us care about Sparrow, that make them feel like a main character. Even after all these years, we still get to build on a relationship between Rose and Sparrow, to see the sort of older sister Rose was, reading this entire entry about how concerned she is about Sparrow. With it ending, "You have to think of something, Rose. You're the big sister, remember? This is the person who Lucien killed, and this is why he needs to be stopped."
Ah, I knew my lovely singing voice would bring the crowds.
Unfortunately, the road to Oakfield has been disrupted. A bridge has been destroyed by bandits who are encouraging us to jump if we want to get across. Here we get the first of many of Teresa's annoying interjections, although this one isn't too bad, telling us we are in fact going to have to jump. I'd obviously have hated to have to come to that realization myself. We dive into the river and emerge on the bank before a hob cave where a father is panicking that his son is inside. While this is something we have to do to progress the main quest, it's not exactly an integral part of the story, and I would normally be pretty happy to skip right past this except for 2 things. One is the reveal that many hobs are lost children who are turned by nymphs from children into these creatures, which is very dark and absolutely recontextualizes this quest from the first game, which never answers why the child was being held by the nymph but is now terrifying. The second is that we are too late to save this boy before he is turned. Fable, still being Fable, making super serious story beats in his whimsical game about playing fetch with our dog. This is horrendous. We separate from a father and we can only hear his screams as he finds he's too late to save his son. And there's something about this being off-screen that makes it even more horrific. We just have to listen, useless, running to hell, but too late to save the boy and maybe to save the father. I know this is a series about impactful choices, but some of the best parts of these games are when we don't get a choice. Maybe just by contrast to the choices we do make, when we're just as subject to all the horrible things that happen around us as everyone else. When there's only one thing to do, no matter how good or evil. This hob will kill his father, and will kill us, unless we stop him first. When we emerge from a hob cave, alone, we're on the far side of a bridge, the 3 bandits still calling over the gap. We do, of course, kill every single one of them. On that super macabre note, arriving in Oakfield is spectacular. This is by far my favourite locale in this game, maybe in all the series. If the only reason for the hob cave was to make the game seem so dark and make Oakfield seem so much brighter in contrast, I am 100% down for that. This place is gorgeous, it's wonderful to explore, to get lost in. Even for a fairly small map, it's one of the few places where Albion feels so alive. Here, we're asked to speak to the abbot by Teresa, who also exposits on the planting of a golden acorn, which is responsible for Oakfield's lush plants and farmland. We're told the abbot is nervous about the ritual to plant this golden acorn and to find out more. Overhearing the conversation as we approach, we're told the abbot will not send his only child into danger, but no more than 2 monks are allowed to enter the sacred cave. Armed only with this knowledge, which is probably more than enough to put together what need the abbot may have of us, he only tells us he can't trust the safety of the community to a stranger, while also telling us absolutely nothing about why he may need us or what he's considering us for. He tells us he needs to know more about us, basically that our in-game renown isn't high enough, and to go and deal with the bandits plaguing Rookridge, the area where we already killed a few bandits and hobs on the way here. So the abbot doesn't tell us explicitly that he needs any help, tells us we aren't good enough to help him, but do everything he says anyway, glad that the only context we have for any of this is the part of the conversation we eavesdropped on. Fine, it's not a problem, he does give us our next steps, so okay. Not really a story problem, but definitely some questionable dialogue and motivations. I can't say the word questionable. Oh, I can. We go to Rookridge, kill some bandits, kill Dash, and we're back with the abbot. We also talk to the ghost of a jilted woman, abandoned on the altar, and set off to seduce her fiancé. She gives us a letter to give him once he's fallen in love with us. I don't want to marry Alex, so I give him a letter. I've already got my eyes on the blacksmith. This is the first time the game locks us out of the main story for not meeting certain conditions, to have enough renown or gold. It becomes a problem later in the game, but here we're still being introduced to the game's system, so being encouraged to engage with them to learn how they work isn't a setback. We need to know what our renown is for, and this demonstrates that. Now the abbot knows we're useful for something, he tells us the problem. The golden acorn has to be nourished with holy water from a nearby cave. This cave, however, is dangerous, which is a great cause of concern as the abbot must send the strongest monk into the cave, who just so happens to be his own child. Teresa tells us we've just found our first hero, just in case we hadn't figured out yet that the strongest monk could actually also be the hero of strength in the exact place we've been sent to find them. We'll talk about Teresa more later because these interjections aren't necessarily problematic, they're just... We'll get into it later. The abbot never actually says his daughter, they're always referred to as his child or as simply the strongest monk. Feels like Fable 2 is trying to set up a little expectation subversion there. You expect the hero of strength and the strongest monk to be a bloke, but psych, it's a young woman. I can't say this twist is especially effective, although that is hard to say, I've already played the game, but I do appreciate the story trying to offer in a few surprises, and that the only one of the 3 who's a woman is the hero of strength, so this is still a really good decision and a cool story beat. This expectation subversion continues to our meeting with the hero of strength also. Having been directed where to find the cave and the strongest monk, we head down this road through Oakfield until we leave the road, where we begin to hear soft singing in the distance growing louder the closer we get.
Down by the reeds, swim the sun.
This has got to be one of the strongest character introductions in the game, maybe even in the whole series. There's just so much that we can intuit about a character just from hearing them sing to themselves. It's so disarming as we approach, challenging what we expect from a character known as the hero of strength, expecting someone like Thunder from Fable 1, and it's just a young woman, alone, singing to herself to pass the time. It totally disables our expectations while letting us know the sort of person Hannah is, someone who's not above chilling calmly in this gorgeous glade and entertaining herself with something as personable as song. This is just something I really like and that I really appreciate. Hannah is the hero we spend the most time with and who we have the best relationship with, and they really plant the seed, pun intended, for that relationship right here and now. Just her singing primes us to be a character who we like before we even see them, and that continues through the game. Hannah really gets to shine during this quest with a strong start, holds her up as an engaging and fun character, and ends strong right at the end. Though after she's recruited we get much less character development from her, so it's great that we get so much here in Oakfield. Her first line is very telling also.
I knew my lovely singing voice would bring the crowds.
She's not someone timid or embarrassed. She's still perfectly in line with who we'd expect to be the hero of strength. She continues to be this blunt in her speech as we continue and see she's not the most patient person. She's also lovely to her dog and, what more need be said? If a dog likes her, then that's the only seal of approval we need. Hannah is just all round likeable. She has her head screwed on right, she knows her place, has her dreams, but accepts her place in the world. She tells us she's made a vow of non-violence, which is the reason she needs our help in the cave, though as the hero of strength she could more than handle herself. Teresa interjects here.
We require a hero, not a pacifist monk.
Which, even for the game, never mind Sparrow, is entirely unnecessary. This issue of Hannah's pacifism is resolved by itself with neither Sparrow nor Teresa's intervention. This is mostly okay. It might not be so obvious we need a fighter, just that we need her, so this does introduce the major point of conflict with Hannah's story. As with many things, it's fine. It's not great, it's not poor, it's just fine. Not Hannah's conflict, that's great, just that Teresa, and therefore the game, doesn't trust us to put two and two together. She continues to be great in the fights too, with lots of character being front and centre from Hannah. She's just so impressed with our fighting and her commentary is so entertaining.
That's right, back in the ground.
What a way to solidify what she said before you entered the cave, that she's jealous you get to do all the fighting. We get to see that jealousy in action, though it shows itself more as an almost reverence. She's just so happy and impressed to watch you fight. She also breaks the fourth wall, though indirectly. And I can't say for definite she's the only one in the game who does so, though I'm sure she is the only person to comment on the hero being silent.
You are a quiet one.
And she says this line and it just made me giggle. The writers absolutely know what they're doing here.
I hope you've got enough ammo to keep doing that.
It's important to know this game doesn't have any ammo. We go to 3 separate water flows until we're interrupted at the last by a monk, Brother Robin. Lucien's men have arrived and are holding the abbot, Hannah's father, hostage. With absolutely zero hesitation, Hannah drops the jug full of sacred water she and the monks need for the ritual, and breaks a giant hammer off the nearest statue, crying that she needs to save her father. It might be a bit sudden that Hannah, raised as a monk bound by an oath to be non-violent, and who knows no other life than the one her father gave her, would give up her sacred duty in 0.2 seconds flat and grab a weapon, something she's likely never even held. It seems almost unbelievable that someone who's only known a life of staunch pacifism would forsake their entire way of life for something so wildly different at a moment's provocation. I'm not questioning her motives, she needs to save a loved one. Only the speed with which she abandons everything she's ever known and is already thinking of violence and harm to someone else. But this isn't a problem, Hannah's built for this sort of thing. She clearly thinks about her life outside of a temple. She's just spent the last 15 minutes without a thought for her own safety, just mesmerised at getting to watch you fight. It's clear where Hannah's head is at, how strong that inner conflict is, to maintain her way of life and her duty to her father and the other monks, or to leave it all behind for something more. This tells us everything we need to know about Hannah, building on everything we've learned about her in the short time we've spent together. She loves the monks and respects her way of life, but none of that is as important to her as her father, not even close. Maybe she wouldn't risk breaking her vow so eagerly for any other monk, but I think she would. That's just who she is, and that goes beyond simply wanting a life that offers more than a monk's. She knows someone is in danger, more so someone close to her, her only family as far as we can tell, and her only thought is of protecting them as best she can. This is also why it's so great that the first time we encounter her she's singing. We so quickly get such a thorough impression of everything about this person, a very warm, soft and light-hearted side, and a side that isn't scared to drop everything and bring a giant-ass hammer to a fight. Teresa drops in a line here about going after Hannah, which... It's like they paid for Zoe Wanamaker, so damn they're going to use Zoe Wanamaker. They're going to give her lines even when they're entirely, wholly, singularly unnecessary. We run up the hill to the abbot's, listening to the exchange between the abbot, Lucien's man and Hannah. They're here to take Hannah, of course, threatening her father if she doesn't come quietly, which she, of course, refuses. We round the bend just as we hear the gunshot, and Hannah cries out. The man takes another shot and presumably misses, which is all the excuse Hannah needs to take a swing, breaking him in half just as she promised she would. She falls to her knees, crying and cursing him, blaming him, but clearly blaming her vows. Her vows were enough to make her hesitate, and that's all it took. I love when stories give characters a line they absolutely will not cross. In this case, to not commit violence. and then explore what it would take to break that character and get them to cross that line, that force them to break themselves down and make decisions that seem so against who they are as a person and everything they stand for. It makes for such wonderful moments where we get to see who a character really is and not just who they're telling the world and telling themselves they are. And Hannah blaming her father's death not on herself, not directly, and not on Lucien's man, but on her inaction due to her vows frames her feelings towards them beautifully. She doesn't blame herself for not being able to kill the man, because she did, with zero effort. She blames this death on one thing. It's the first thing she says during his funeral too. She isn't sorry about breaking her vow, but that she didn't break it sooner, on her knees after burying him with a golden acorn.
I'm sorry, Father. Not that I broke my vow. I'm sorry I didn't break it sooner.
You just have to appreciate Fable refusing to pull its punches when it needs to. This is still a game about farting at people and bewitching people into wanting to marry you with your dancing skills, but the main story is still going to take itself as seriously as the first game. A daughter loses her father, shot before her eyes, and she is forced to break her vow and leave the only life she's ever known. As far as story goes, this quest hasn't been too demanding on the player. We just had to fight some hollow men in a cave, nothing special. But this is such a good fragment of story for Hannah and for recruiting our first hero. It's something that's going to continue through Fable 2, with strong characters with their own lives and conflict, but that does nothing for the hero of Bower Lake. It's both simultaneously great and bad. Hannah continues to be a great supporting character through the game, with her own arc of befriending and coming to care for the hero, and that starts off really strong here. Just taking this story by itself, it works incredibly well. It sets up Hannah's internal conflict and allows that conflict to express itself outwardly, in Hannah's case with a big hammer. In a very short amount of time, we get a strong sense of character, and then get to see her go through a full character arc in the space of one quest. Everything about this should be applauded. Hannah's introduction, her dialogue, her personality through the quest, the rapid setup of her wants and her needs, the drawbacks of her life, and then forcing her into another place entirely. Not into being another person, she's still herself. Just a more realised version of herself, and that's honestly incredible over the course of one quest, one pseudo cutscene, and one cutscene. None of this has a single thing to do with the main character, however. These are not their problems or their challenges, and they're not forced into any sort of confrontation or difficult choice that would require them to change, or make any decision that would alter any of these events in any way at all, large or small, meaningful or not. These choices are all Hannah's. I want to throw it out there that Hannah's choice to break her vow and kill this guy is more interesting than any choice we get to make in this game, something that will be clearer by the end. The only thing that was needed of a main character in this quest was to defend Hannah, and that's all they did. The abbot could have gone to Rookridge, hired a bandit to aid Hannah, and all of this would have played out identically. We didn't do anything, make a single choice, exert any level of influence over any part of this story or its outcome, and none of it meant anything to us. It's horrible for Hannah and it's difficult to watch, but she's still a stranger, the dead abbot even more so. Their death doesn't mean anything to us, not in any meaningful way. Sure, this is the impetus Hannah needs to embrace being the hero with strength, but that's all about her. So, this is a great quest. It introduces and upholds a likeable character who it's enjoyable to spend time with. It tells a compelling story with actual conflict, full resolution that forces a character arc, and that deserves recognition. This is a great part of the story and a great introduction to our quest to find the three heroes, but it also proves how unnecessary we are in what is apparently our own story. Putting the blame for her father's death on her vows, Hannah makes one more vow and promises to not break this one. A vow to kill Lucien for what he's done. There's a lot to love about Fable, including a lot to love about its characters and story. For as much as these games love to kill off characters' loved ones, I wouldn't say it's particularly strong at dealing with those characters' grief or allowing them to express that grief. The hero of Oakvale comes close once or twice, but even that's nothing extensive. We're early into this game, but we never see Sparrow express any grief over Rose's death, except so much that it stops them from dying. Hannah, though, is so furious she refuses to do the blessing over the acorn, and then walks to the cliff's edge to shout over it just to scream.
Is that it then? My father's gone. The golden oak is flourishing again. So now life just goes on as before, does it?
What a phenomenal expression of a refusal to believe in death, to refuse to comprehend what's happened. How unbelievable that everything just goes on the same as before. It suits Hannah so much. She's not meek and tearful, she's goddamn furious. She's not going to be quiet, she's going to shout. Seeing so few characters express any level of grief robs us of so many opportunities to learn about them. But we get that here. This builds on so much of what we already know about Hannah, seeing a different, bitter side of her that's still entirely true to her character. Yeah, I've talked so much about Hannah. It just feels like there's so much to say. We get so much good characterization from her, even when the focus isn't on her at all. We get to see Hannah go through so much so quickly that we're just in the backseat along for the ride, and it's one of the best things the game does. It's all to get Hannah where she needs to be for the game, which isn't a problem. The way she gets there is so interesting and affecting and gratifying. These few lines of her shouting over the cliff's edge are, I think, a perfect example that Fable is trying to do its best with the story and with its characters, and to elevate their writing. Even if this is literally just like 3 lines, it's a really good 3 lines. It's proof of what Fable 2 wants its story to be and where its narrative priorities are, in the rapid build-up of strong characters, particularly the 3 heroes we collect. But it does leave the hero, the main character, way behind. Teresa appears and offers to give Hannah exactly what she wants, her best shot at revenge against Lucien, framed against the backdrop of the growing spire. Hannah, now Hammer, takes Teresa's hand and the two disappear back to the Chamber of Fate. Why does Teresa get to warp to wherever she wishes? We have to walk around like an asshole. We have our first of the 3 heroes and can start the search for the second.
Be patient. Time has little meaning here.
The 3 of us, now with Hammer, reconvene in the Chamber of Fate, where Teresa has located our mage in a tower in Brightwood. You may not remember, you may not even have noticed, but you've seen Garth already. He was there the night Lucien killed Rose. Hannah asks the all-important question of how we can trust and work with someone who used to work with Lucien, and Teresa gives a pretty good answer. Both thought the other's interest was purely academic, nothing more than a historic pursuit into the Old Kingdom. When Bo found out the other was hiding secrets, Garth that he was a will user, Lucien that he was a megalomaniac with an interest in 50-50 blowing up Albion, they both went their separate ways. Garth is already at odds with Lucien because of this, because he already knows the sort of power the Spire can wield, so we decide to bring him on board as our goals already align. Hannah is forced to remain behind rather than risk Lucien finding her and bringing her into his clutches, something he's still actively attempting to do. And this acknowledgement lets us know that even if we can't see Lucien, even if he's absent, he's still working in the background, his plans are still unfolding, and he's still trying to stop us as best he can. Although, he never does. I don't think he ever even comes close. We wander over to Brightwood where Teresa drops a warning that
Someone or something is coming your way. I have never felt anything like it.
This is one of the few times that Teresa's monologuing is actually adding something to the story. I told you I wasn't just going to focus on the negatives, because it puts our guard up and brings attention to the quest that we otherwise wouldn't have felt. It's about the only time she doesn't outright tell us what's coming, which is what she normally does. Now we're just waiting for something bad to happen, for something to drop on us, and it changes what would otherwise be a pretty standard run through an area to reach the objective into uncharted territory. What could it be that has even Teresa concerned? The answer to that isn't great, and whatever mystery Teresa sets up is answered very quickly, and it turns out to not really be very exciting. It's just a piece of a spire that can drop in enemies, and it's kind of just shown to us. It's actually a bit awkward, there's no sound, it's just a thing flying around the tower. This in itself is a pretty average fight, but the narrative ramifications go deeper than just the new enemy type. The Spire and Lucien are making progress in getting Old Kingdom technology, such as colorscape teleportation, online, and there's now enough of the Spire to break off shards, get them functioning, and send them out into the world. This is exciting to think about, even if the way it's presented isn't very engaging. We're told to be wary about something, so we go in cautiously, and all it does is drop off some new guys like a really violent daycare, and then leaves. It's excellent proof that Lucien is getting closer to his goal and closer to finishing the Spire, and can now mobilise his men so much faster. It's possible Teresa oversold this thing, it doesn't even have anything to do with us, at least not yet, but we'll get to fight a few of these things later. From the abundance of enemies in the presence of a Spire shard, it's clear that we're not the only ones here, and now we have to race against the Spire guards to grab Garth before they do. We fight towards the tower, break in and overhear 2 voices from the peaks above arguing. Garth refusing to be taken, and a new character, the Commandant, who's here to snatch Garth away. The tower has caught on fire and partially fallen in, stopping us from intervening as these two exchange words, calling back to Lucien and Garth's old partnership, before the Commandant electrocutes Garth and the Spire fragment takes them both. Having failed, Teresa invites us back to the guild to plan our next move now that Garth has been taken. First, I want to point out this book I found addressing why the in-game map changed so much between Fable 1 and Fable 2, stating that technology and the methods they use to measure the coast has developed and expanded in 500 years, allowing them to better chart the coastline, roads and rivers. This is something the game didn't need to include, but I absolutely love that they addressed this in-universe, but it has an actual explanation in the game. It makes this world feel so much more real and alive. that time, a good amount of time, really has passed. What a great little detail. Garth will have been taken to the Spire, so we now need to find a way in, and with no idea how we may be able to do that, we decide to track down Lucien's old butler, Jeeves. I was going to make a joke about how of course the butler's called Jeeves, and that reminded me that the only reason we think of Jeeves as a stereotypical butler's name is because... Is this actually a reference to this old TV show with Hugh Laurie, and Fable's own Reaver, Stephen Fry? Huh. Hammer channels the mood every British person feels at 5 o'clock.
Well, if it means a trip to the pub, we'll just have to make that sacrifice.
Unfortunately, Teresa vetoes Hannah's presence on the ground this may require subtlety, which is a shame, but still, she'll be with us in the next quest, so it's okay. We find Jeeves in Bowerstone's Cow and Corset conveniently selling Lucien's secrets, which is hidden away, but will sell us the location for 1,000 gold. This is pocket change at this point, but I can't help but feel that the game is funneling us towards working more jobs and engaging in more mini-games or a property system to have that income passively. This falls a little close to mechanical review, but it feels like this game really forsook combat for social and economical mechanics. The combat is good in this game, it absolutely is, but the magic is basic with very few spells. The enemy variety is on the low end, less than Fable 1 so many years before it. Our ranged weapons are limited until we unlock the zoom and sub-aim options, and none of the quests reward us gold. The only way to earn gold is via jobs or by buying property to create that passive income. Almost everything we do is funneled into ensuring that we engage with those systems. We can also find gold out in the world in chests and dig spots which the dog finds, so that's also the game making the canine companion worthwhile too. Only getting renown for finishing quests, not gold, is so telling about how this game wants you to play. I point this out because I think this does have an effect on the story, because the story it feels is forcing you towards these systems, no matter how much you do or don't want to engage with them. If you've rushed through the story to get to this point and tried to keep your gear upgraded, you might not have 1,000 gold, so you'd have to stop the mission, freeze this main story quest in its place, and you go and work some minigames. And sure, the minigames can be fun, but pressing a single button against a timer doesn't hit the dopamine quite like.
Consequence!
This is the same later in the game for entering the Crucible and convincing Reaver to hear you out. If your renown is too low, the game tells you to sod off until it's higher. The main quest stalls becomes walled off until we've done enough for the game to tell us it's okay to proceed. For most people I expect that's fine, but putting this potential block in the way is going to be frustrating for some. Leveling may show this even better. I can't tell how much XP is given by enemies, but it's little enough that this got me nowhere near the highest levels in the game. The best way to level up is to buy potions that give you XP, but those can be on the more expensive side. The game doesn't give you gold for completing missions, but it still makes the best way to level up rely on having that gold. Want to level up? Be rich, buy potions and pay your way there. So we pay Jeeves his 1,000 gold and get the location of where he buried Lucien's diary. There, we defeat our first troll and claim Lucien's diary, which needs translating from whatever language it's written in. Teresa asks us to bring it back to her at the guild so she can translate it, which begs the question which fortunately Hannah asks, which is that Teresa is blind. She gives a vague non-answer which is perfectly in line with Teresa's character of telling nothing to no one, so cool. From a diary she gives us our next location, Westcliff. Specifically the Westcliff Crucible where Lucien is recruiting guards, which is apparently the only way into the Spire and to Garth. Hannah rushes off, this time without being stopped by Teresa. Which is fair, she said 2 or 3 times now that she isn't going to miss out, and seemed to take it hard that Garth was taken while she wasn't there to stop the Commandant. Though it's also clear she agrees with what Teresa said, knowing that if she had been there, both she and Garth could have been taken. It's odd that she's now running that risk, with the only development being that Lucien can instantly teleport people from one side of Albion to the other, so should warrant a higher degree of caution, but that's never been Hammer's strong suit. I appreciate her restraint so far, and appreciate her lack of restraint here. She's been held back too long and now Garth may need her. I'm not going to go in depth in this diary, it really just sets up Lucien's building of the Spire. It also reconfirms the name of his wife and daughter, Helena and Amelia. We meet Hammer on the road to Westcliff and begin our way towards the Crucible. Hannah warns us that Westcliff is infested with Balverines, regaling us with a story of a boy whose parents were killed, and when he was found, he turned and killed everyone who had helped him. A nice reminder that Balverines are people who've been bitten and turned, with the distinction from werewolves being that Balverines can't turn back into people, he said, foreshadowingly. On the road we meet a terrified woman. Her husband was killed by Balverines who have dragged her son into a nearby crypt. When we get there we see this, which is such a treat for players of the first game because we see such a different side of the Balverines. Never, in all of the first game, were Balverines ever just sat watching us. For new players, I imagine it brings a whole new aspect to the enemy they just encountered, realising there's more to Balverines than they thought. The woman accompanies us the whole way, scared, hoping we're fast enough to save her son, until the crypt ends in this big room, and unbelievably, it's a trap. She's a white Balverine, and with a genuinely terrifying voice change, disappears upwards, telling her brood that it's time to feed.
Children, I bring you flesh.
This evolution of a white Balverines is a fantastic addition to this new world and the enemy types, because that's what I think this is meant to be, an evolution. 500 years ago, no Balverine could shift, but now the white Balverines can, to trick humans, to lure them into danger and kill them. Balverines can't be cured or saved the same as always, but they've adapted, changed, and are now a bigger threat than ever. So while this is clearly an ambush and clearly dangerous, and this woman is clearly lying, the idea that this woman is a white Balverine is still surprising. For everything we're expecting, and we're expecting a horde of Balverines, we aren't expecting her to be a Balverine, and certainly not a white Balverine. A great little quest to introduce the Balverines and the white Balverine, which we'll encounter again in the Crucible, while making them distinct from the previous game and an even greater threat. These little stories are so effective, and it's something I appreciate Fable does. When they introduce a new enemy with a story that does something to make them seem more threatening, to add an emotional weight to the encounter so it's more than just throwing a new enemy at you. This has nothing to do with the main story, but it doesn't have to. We're still making progress to Westcliff, and we've dynamically learned that these enemies are way more numbersome and way more dangerous than we thought. After you fight your way out and escape, you emerge almost directly on top of Westcliff, which is everything we were told it would be. A lawless place, barely a village, more a series of stores and drinking holes held together by blood and duct tape. We can enter the Crucible, but Hammer cannot, nor can our dog for health and safety, obviously a prime concern. It feels odd to take our dog away from us for this section of the game. It's not like the dog is so useful in combat it tilts our odds in any way. But I can appreciate them making it feel like you're going into this entirely alone, for the first time in the game, which ups the odds just that little bit more, making the Crucible that bit more dangerous. Not that the Crucible is a challenge, AoE spells in this game kick ass and we can tank a few hits charging up a spell. We fight our way through to Crucible Infamy and come out the other side without too much hassle. Once we're out of the Crucible, we're told we have a place working for Lucien as a Spire guard and are urged to embark, or is it disembark, on the boat that will take us to the Spire. Teresa congratulates us for having won, and Hammer's just as ecstatic about watching us fight as she was when we were in the cave together. It's pretty infectious enthusiasm. She also says we should take some time to make sure our affairs are in order before we set off for the Spire, encouraging us to see anyone we may want to spend time with. Having gotten to this point, it feels like we get here so quickly, like this story is really rushing by. The Crucible is great fun, but it comes so early in the game and it feels as though so little has happened to get us here, and we're already about to be locked out of Albion and Spire for some time. All we've really done is find Hannah in Oakfield and explore a cave with her, gone to Brightwood Tower to not recover Garth, and found Lucien's diary, which, while being a nice bit of character work for the antagonist, is only set up to get us into the Crucible and vents into the Spire. I get to use the word vents because I'm posh. There's so much to do in this game that you spend so little of your time progressing the actual main quest, which is likely the intention. It pads out the game and slows down the experience, which is definitely necessary because there's very little that's actually happened in the narrative so far, and nothing hugely impactful, least of all to the hero. Garth being taken is a great setback and one that we go to great lengths to circumvent. That's perfect conflict and much needed. But it doesn't exactly pack the emotional wallop of Hannah seeing her father killed in front of her. So we're just being pulled through these few missions without feeling really any significance to their passage. The game was really not designed to just rush the main story. That's clear with how many of the main quests require you to step away before being able to progress. We've just been told to not rush straight to the Spire, but to take time out to visit our families and get our side quests and jobs in line. Maybe this is because the game tells you to make sure you have everything handled before you embark on this quest, making it clear you're passing a point of no return, and it feels so soon for the game to be locking us out. It's a really odd part of the main story that the pacing is just quite hard to nail down. The main story shouldn't require you to step away from it to feel like it's taking place over the length of time it's implying. The story should stand by itself with the addition of side content if we choose to pursue it, but those shouldn't alter the main story. This main story only works if you engage with the minigame jobs, the economy, if you do all the side content, which makes this difficult to get a read on. It's hard to judge the pace of the main story by itself when the actual main story forces you to leave it, making it clear, and at times obligatory, to leave and play with Fable's other systems. The main story by itself is paced poorly more often than not, but are we meant to judge the pace of a main story by itself, or with those other aspects of a game in mind. But my point remains that I have married, I have worked jobs, I have done side content, and it still feels rushed to have reached this point regardless of what Fable wants. This isn't the first time the game has felt rushed either. It's a constant problem with a game's main quest, for even when I'm spending all this time between main quests, I seem to just arrive in the main story with no introduction or lead up. I'm just there. It happens in Oakfield before we find Hannah, it happens here, and it happens at the end of the game when Bloodstone is attacked. The pacing in this game is all over the place. Hammer is waiting for us on the docks, ready to see us onto the boat and away towards the spire. She tells us she's here to say goodbye, then telling us that she doesn't know the last word she spoke to her father the morning of his death, regretfully adding she can't remember if she said goodbye or not. She adds this nice line.
That's the funny thing about goodbyes. You never know when you'll get another one.
Which is a really nice line and such compelling insight into what Hammer is thinking, just a little bit more to get into how she's feeling about having to say this goodbye to the hero. Even when she never says so, it's clear that she's scared for you. Hammer is so well written and so well thought out as a character, to give her these little moments to make it clear how she's feeling without ever outright saying it. Of course she's not over the death of her father, shot not 5 feet away from her. Of course she doesn't want to see you go, never knowing if you'll make it back, even though she tells you you're going to do great. She gets so few lines, but they carry so much meaning. Hammer's such a good character. Before we can board the ship, we're told no personal effects, no weapons and no dogs. Which isn't a problem because he's left with Hammer, who we know will look after him as best she can. We're treated to this cutscene, and damn do I remember how excited I used to get at something that graphically looked this incredible. This is definitely dated, but it's not bad by any means. We've only seen the Sparrow as a small spike growing out of the sea in the far distance, but now, as the ship approaches, we can see its true scale, how monolithic this is, how imposing and awe-inspiring in its scale. The spire didn't look this big in the cutscene we saw that destroyed the Old Kingdom, it looks so much larger now, like Lucien is building it so much bigger than it was before. For the first time, we get a chance to appreciate the true scale of what Lucien is doing, and we just have to pause and admire what we're up against. This thing is objectively terrifying in its size and potential. Lucien is vastly more ambitious and resourceful than we ever realised. After disembarking, setting foot inside the tattered spire for the first time, we get to chat to Bob. An excitable bloke who's happy to be working with Lucien and thrilled at the thought of what benefits this could bring him and his wife, Lil. No aspersions on Bob here, but are you telling me that this guy beat the Crucible? Bob, who just wants what's best for his wife, who's excited just of a chance to be here? Or did Bob not win the Crucible and there is another way to gain employment under Lucien and Teresa really just jumped the gun on saying the Crucible was the only way? All we can see in the Crucible are the workers, slaves, and the guards, and Bob is a guard. Bob is super important for this section of the game and provides us with one of the few genuinely compelling choices the game gives us, but could he not be a bit more of someone we believed could pass the Crucible? Anyway, lovely Bob dives straight into talking about how much he loves his wife of 13 years, which is very sweet. It's so endearing, which is exactly what the game is meant to be doing, and it makes us like Bob so much. Lovely Bob, I hope nothing bad happens to him. Another random NPC confirms for us again that this is being rebuilt using Old Kingdom engineering techniques, but has no idea how that's possible. I don't think it's ever explained how Lucien does bring back any Old Kingdom engineering, including the shards and the ability to teleport individuals, but honestly, it's great that it's not explained. Keep that mystique around him. The hero never learns this, so why should we? Lucien is vastly more resourceful and intelligent than anyone else. He not only found the remnants of a tattered spire, which is detailed in his diary, but learned how to rebuild and reactivate long-lost echoes of our ancient past. Lucien is just a man, but he does the impossible, all of these things which are so vastly beyond our comprehension. Even if we are an ancestor of Archon, so much of what Lucien accomplishes, and Lucien himself, remain an enigma beyond our understanding. At the end of the path before entering the spire proper, we finally get to see Lucien for the first time since he killed our sister and shot us out of a window. The years have not been kind to him. He has a nice speech prepared which basically boils down to telling us the world is unfair, but mostly it's unfair to him. He refuses to fall victim to the whims of fate, calling it chaos, a force which cannot be controlled and which is to blame for cutting innocent lives short. Lucien says he's going to use the spire to remake the world. Reading between the lines, it actually sounds like he plans to end death, stop anyone from ever dying again, which seems consistent with an entry in his diary too, though he might mean nothing more than bringing back his loved ones. He doesn't have a secret they wouldn't have died if they had just grieved hard enough. No, I'm not dropping it. He doesn't reveal to the masses his motivation is purely selfish. It's clear he's lost himself, withered by the years since his family's death, pouring all of himself into this one thing so much it's consumed him. He believes wholeheartedly in his conviction, convincing himself he's no longer just benefiting himself, but everyone, the entire world, with his goal. Pure megalomaniacal. I got that right first time. A great bit of character building, bringing Lucien to the centre of the story again just in case we forgot who we're fighting, and why we're fighting him. He never outright says what he plans on using the Spire for, he never even says what it's capable of, only that it's an instrument of change, and that alone is terrifying. Anyone with that sort of power would be a threat. Lucien with that sort of power could become a god. Lastly, he brings us into the fold, making it clear that we are vital to his industry. All of us, together, can accomplish what no individual, not even Lucien, can. He needs us, and only with all of us together can Albion be transformed. Which is interesting phrasing. He never says he will be the one to transform Albion. He downplays his own importance in this to make it seem like it's bigger than him and goes beyond his own desires. That it will benefit us as individuals and all of Albion. A little wordplay there to really bring you to his side, to make you feel more important than you are. All he needs is unquestioned obedience. To bring all of that home, he puts you to sleep.
Now, sleep.
The first thing we're told when we wake up is that now we're here, we're never leaving. We've been set up as a guard the same as Bob and are of a cohort of arrivals, told that our duties boil down to basically doing whatever the Commandant tells us as soon as he tells us, without question and without delay. Our HR representative also points out the collar we're now wearing, the complete function of which the Commandant will explain. This ensures our obedience, should that ever be in question, but its main function, and something much, much worse, is that it blocks our access to our will abilities. Without weapons, without magic, without any opportunity at all to even disobey, we truly are trapped. We pass Bob on our way up, who again talks about nothing but his wife, which is as sweet as it always is. For the first time we also see Garth holed up in a cell. He talks to us, I think, telepathically, which has never existed before, but Garth is the preeminent will user. He doesn't say much except we can't do anything while we're limited by our collar, and tells us we must be patient. We are sent to the Commandant and get to meet him for the first time, though we've seen him before briefly. This is the man who took Garth from Brightwood Tower. The Commandant is a pretty run-of-the-mill cruel and evil type. He only exists here just so we can hate him and so we can focus our hatred at being trapped here on a single person. He's not the most interesting character in the game, though he probably is the second biggest antagonist behind Lucien, or arguably Reaver, but he's not especially interesting. He does Lucien's bidding and revels in being malicious, but not for any reason really other than to be a dick. He looks and sounds cool, and he has one job, which is to be terrifying and mean. He may have less depth than a shower, but the one thing he does extremely damn well. It's not a point against him or the narrative that this guy is just a cardboard cutout, it serves the story perfectly. We just need a stand-in to exemplify the sort of people Lucien is working with and what his enterprise really stands for, what methods he's using to achieve his goals. Lucien can speechify all he wants about how glorious and necessary his work is, but this is his right-hand man. The Commandant isn't a character, he's a symbol of everything corrupt about Lucien and what he's doing and how corrupt the Spire is. We're meant to just hate him, like we're meant to hate everything Lucien is attempting. There's something deeply wrong with the Tattered Spire, even if it is just a tool, and the Commandant is the heart of that corruption. We're told the Spire has taken 10 years to build and will take many more, but if we're in jail for 10 years and it's basically done by the time we get out, building something on this scale in just over 20 years is unbelievably impressive. Lucien deserves at least some recognition for pulling something like this off. The Old Kingdom had, presumably, some crazy powerful will users. Lucien just has a ton of grit and determination. And a ton of slaves, but what are you gonna do? It's definitely commendable that Lucien is able to pull this off at all, that he's able to do it in such a short timeline is crazy. There's some real drive and ambition behind this endeavour, and even if Lucien is misguided from a start, he does accomplish something noteworthy on a scale that Albion has never seen before. Just to reinforce how we're meant to feel about the Commandant, he tells you he is going to hit you and that you are going to thank him. I think it's fair to roll all of these obey or disobey choices up into one choice here in the Spire. Every choice here really just boils down to those two outcomes. We're going to be faced with it a few times while we're here. The choice of Bob, I will say, is a separate choice to this, and those are sort of the two main choices that you're faced with in the Spire. We can obey, which is usually the evil outcome, or disobey, which causes us to lose in-game XP as we are shocked by our collar. This is the game taking the consequences of our actions more seriously, because this actually alters how we move forward in the game. You get more than a moral outcome to this. The price of our disobedience is to be made weaker, both for Sparrow, trapped in the Spire, and for the player. Disobeying, being good, doesn't just mean you get hit and lose health, or even fake die. It goes much, much farther than that. The alternative to this is that this is such a narratively meaningless choice that the outcome can't be reflected in just the story. We can starve these prisoners/slaves, and if we do, nothing more really happens. We don't ever see these people again, we get a small dialogue change from a commandant later, but no changes to the story, even in Spire, whether we do or don't starve these people once our punishment has been meted out. We have no reason to care for these people except that we're told doing so makes us good. So it all comes back down to the binary good-evil outcome. This just changes a stat and affects how the NPCs view us in the world outside the Spire. For story, it doesn't matter, so we need a second layer of motivation, a real consequence to our action of disobeying, which occurs in-game. The outcome of this decision is more the former, that there are more dire consequences to our choices, but that doesn't exactly render the latter untrue. We get some bad boy points and that's it. There's no further ramifications to this decision to obey or not, and it never comes up again in the story in any meaningful way. We jump forward to week 38, less than a year spent in Spire, but not an entirely insignificant amount of time. Bob tells us he had to torture a recruit that morning for mentioning how much he misses his family, then follows with how glad he is that he doesn't have a family. We were told if we disobeyed, the collars would erase our memories, basically melt our minds, and they were not kidding. Bob was never cut out for this work, and even when he's forgotten so much, he was still clearly upset at having to torture someone. It's not hard to imagine Bob struggling to obey many of the commands given to the guard, and it's led to this. The only thing he could talk about was his wife. She was the only reason he was here, to make a life of the two of them, and the Spire, the Commandant, Lucien, all of them have robbed that from him. Garth once again tells us to be patient, throwing in that the Spire is only going to grow more powerful, and exactly how it's doing that, by sapping the will out of everyone it can. This is the last time we'll talk to Garth until we escape. Jumping forward again to week 137 and another meeting with a commandant who has a special task for us. He draws our attention to a man lying on the floor mumbling incoherently. Bob, who appears to have fully lost his mind, broken by the Spire and by his duties permanently. The collar extracting everything it can until it can take no more. The commandant chose us either because we've been such a good guard or as punishment for past indiscretions, taking this as the best opportunity he has to force us to obey. The first thing the Commandant tells us is that he knows Bob and you are acquainted, so it's potentially more that the Commandant is just being more evil, reveling in forcing you to kill your friend, maybe your only friend. Wait, is this just an analog to Whisper? The Commandant gives us his sword and we are faced with one of Fable 2's genuinely difficult choices. Do we kill Bob or not? One is obviously good and one evil, but this isn't that black and white. Bob is already an empty husk, gibbering nothings into the floor, seemingly unaware of a Commandant and you entirely. It doesn't look like there's any coming back from this. You mean to say that leaving him like this is the best thing for him? We know he has a wife, but he no longer does. And now, whatever chance he had to reunite with her is gone. Even if he were to leave Spire, would he stay in this state? This is something that Fable 2 does so well, to give us interesting and well-written characters and to establish them very quickly. Bob was obviously never going to make it through, he was always too lovely to survive. And even though it's clearly the case that Bob's entire personality and backstory is designed with this one moment in mind, to make this an emotional and difficult decision, it still absolutely works. This is one of the very few defining moments the hero has. I think that's also more true because objectively, killing Bob in this state is probably a mercy. Undeniably evil, but a mercy nonetheless. If this choice was being presented by anyone but the Commandant, if this murder wasn't framed as blindly obeying someone every instinct in our body is telling us to disobey, this would be a very different decision. Even if we do everything the Commandant asks, it's because we have to measure the outcomes of agreeing or refusing against each other. I expect even people on an evil playthrough would detest doing what they're told because even though they want to be evil, it grates against our sense of pride and ego to obey this man in this fashion. The framing of this choice, with the Commandant, the mercy killing, the rigid binary objectivity of his being good or evil, that all comes to bear. There's no world where this is an easy choice. Even if you want to kill him, because that's arguably the right thing to do for him, being forced to do it by the Commandant gets our hackles up. Killing him is no longer a mercy, it's not even our decision. We're just doing what we're told to do by the Commandant because we've been conditioned to do so, because we're a good employee who comes running when he snaps his fingers. So, like all of the best choices in Fable, this one has multiple layers to it. But the punishment for disobeying is severe. And this is the best thing for Bob. We get a very cool cutscene that shows the passage of time, that shows the spire growing into the firmament above us, while Lucien and, more importantly, Garth remain out of reach. The art style in these cutscenes is just so good as well. We're only told when gameplay resumes that this takes place now many years later. We are still here, still a guard, still doing the same old job in the same old place over the same old slaves. Those who have survived. We're told to report to the Commandant because I think 90% of our job is just being told he wants to see us. They're beginning work on the construction for the upper tier, so despite that we just saw the spire more than double in height, it's still not done. The man overseeing the site has gone missing and he needs someone to investigate. Of course, we run off and investigate only to find the bloke we're looking for lying in a ditch, dead. Before we really get the chance to wonder too hard, we're struck by lightning and Garth calls out to us. He removes our collar just as he removed his own, explaining it took years to build up enough will to kill the guard and remove both the collars. If there's any fighting to be done, he's tapped out. You grab the dead guard's sword and make a run for it. Garth also says, "You came to rescue me." And he means he's going to allow you to do that job, but what he's really doing is rescuing you. Yes, he needs you to escape if he's so tapped out he can barely run and do nothing more, but without him you would never have even got the collar off. The game never says if you could have saved up the will reserves to remove your own collar, but as this is the hero of will, it's possible this is something he can only do because it's his discipline. You can use will, maybe even master it, but can you master it the same as the hero dedicated to it? Garth has not been here much longer than us, and he saved up enough will to remove 2 collars and to kill someone. We didn't even save up enough to hurt anyone. So, yes, this is a moment that shows how unimportant the hero is in their own story, often left to the whims and activeness of other characters. But this is also exactly as it should be. Garth is a will specialist, of course he should be stronger than us. Of course he should be able to use the will in ways we can't. Maybe it's the confluence of the 3 disciplines, there's nothing saying the hero can't be as powerful as Garth, but they're definitely younger and less experienced, and much less learned than he is. Garth should use will powers to get us out, it's the one thing he has. This is something that wouldn't be such a problem, at least a problem for the hero's agency in their own story, if this was the only time they were less active than other main characters. If this wasn't how it was through the entire narrative. We could be active elsewhere and bow out here, allowing another main character to take the reins. But the hero of Bower Lake is inactive in collecting Hammer, Garth and Reaver. Hell, they don't even confront Lucien, you arrive at the spire without explanation. I think the music box takes you there. As it is, this is just another arrow in the quiver that the hero means nothing in this story. All Garth needs is anyone who can swing a sword, and sure, we can swing a sword better than most, but we're not the only one who can. To escape, we have to do so through a colour skate in the Commandant's chamber. We know Lucien has unlocked some degree of colour skate technology, so this makes perfect sense. It's not like we can steal a boat and sail it all the way back to shore. We fight our way through the spire, reveling in the freedom and catharsis of so many years of pent-up blind obedience, not only happy but eager to kill so many of these guards who lack our pure moral compass. We fight our way through the spire and up through the Commandant's chambers. Garth tells us we can't leave without killing the Commandant, although that isn't for revenge. It might not be for Garth, but it is for us. For what he did to Bob, what he made us do to him. The Commandant really is a great example of a character we love to hate and love the chance to kill. Kudos to the game for making a character we want to kill not for any complicated decision, not because we have a personal vendetta, not because it's an expression of a binary morality choice, but just because he's an utter bastard. Just because this man cannot be allowed to live. Once we kill him, Garth steals all of our XP, so he too must die. Garth, it turns out, is an XP vampire. He takes the strength and will of a Commandant to fuel himself, reigniting his will powers and returning to his full power, or near enough. Then he gives us back his XP, so we'll let him live for now. With his will powers returned, he can ignite the colour skate in the Commandant's chambers and we can, at long last, leave the tattered spire. Actually, we just teleport to the dockyard. Garth said docks, but I thought he meant the docks back on Albion where we do arrive. We know there are colour skates in Albion, though there's no way for Garth to know about many of these. Is the colour skate really the only way to get down to that level? There aren't stairs? They built this 200-story tower and didn't at any point create an easier ingress? Lucien knocks us out when we get here. Are there a bunch of guards carrying unconscious people through the colour skates? They all have to go through the Commandant's chamber? I played this game and even I forgot we don't leave the spire through the thing that can teleport us to anywhere in the world, or at least any other colour skate. We use that to just go to a different part of the same building we're in. We do leave on a boat we steal. Garth thanks us for his help as 2 individuals are waiting for us on the Oakfield docks. Our dog runs at us and jumps, showing us how much he missed us, and we absolutely missed him too. Teresa's here as well. She tells us how long we've been in Aspire.
10 years. Welcome back, my friend.
Which is insane. I don't care that the game told us it was many years, or Teresa that it was 10, I do not believe this. That makes our dog well over 20 years old. Garth and the hero look the same as when they went in, so does Hammer, so does everyone. I'd buy the 10 years thing except for the glaring obviousness that my child, who was born before I left, is still not 10 years old. On my first playthrough, my child aged up before I left for the Spire, and with a bit of research it looks like that isn't meant to happen. Your child will remain as a baby until you return from Aspire. And if that's the whole point, why did they make it so they still look like they're 7 years old? The game tells us that some things have changed, some of the map has changed, but the game does nothing else anywhere to indicate that 10 years have passed. It didn't feel like 10 years when we were playing through it, it doesn't feel like 10 years when we came out the other end, and there's absolutely nothing in the game, except for the physical changes to the map the game tells us to notice, to indicate that anywhere near that amount of time has passed. My spouse still looks the same, and if that's because the game couldn't age every NPC up by 10 years, then, very simply, do not make the amount of time we're trapped be as much as 10 years. I don't want to make any comparisons to Fable 1, but the game clearly is. This is only a guess, but it feels like the only reason this is 10 years was to make it seem more epic than the year the hero of Oakvale spent in Bargate Prison. A year makes perfect sense, maybe even 5 years. 10 years does not work here and it doesn't make any sense. There's no reason for this to have been 10 years, except so the developers can pretend this game is larger than Fable 1's, because this has no impact on any part of the gameplay or story whatsoever. Nothing and no one has changed in any meaningful way. It doesn't make a lick of difference to the hero of Bower Lake if this was 10 years or 10 days. They're still the same. The dog is still the same. Their spouse, house and children are all the same. I mean, they're not babies, but you know. Their skills are still the same, and definitely if they did everything evil. There's no reason for us to have been away for 10 years and plenty of reasons for it to have not been 10 years. They can make the changes to Albion, to pretend that it's really been so many years, wink wink, in significantly less time than 10 years. The game did one effective thing to make this time feel impactful, which is when I went back to my family and my husband and he introduced me to my daughter who said this.
Are you my mum? It's very nice to meet you.
Because that is exactly what a child would say to a parent they've only been told exists but never met. I felt it was important to point this out because while this child is not 10 years old, the game absolutely addresses that they had to get to even this age without us. That does not excuse the game claiming that 10 years have passed but not committing to it, but I really appreciate that they thought about the impact this would have on our children and on the hero as a parent. This really lands, and it hit me real hard, and I just wanted to make sure it was clear how good that is. Garth wants to get lost until Teresa convinces him to join us. She takes his hand and they venture back to the Chamber of Fate. We escaped the Spire, saved Garth, returned him to Teresa and got him to the Chamber of Fate. We have secured our second hero, the hero of Will, and have only one hero left to collect before we can confront Lucien. And boy is it a doozy.
You've done all sorts of impressive things, and yet you haven't really done anything that benefits me.
On Teresa's instruction, we rush to Rookridge to meet Hammer, who we know is going to be ecstatic to see us. I'm gonna level with you. I played through this game before recording it to refamiliarise myself with the story. Knowing I'd play through it twice, I decided the first playthrough would be as a girl and the second would be as a guy. But when I barged through the doors to the Rookridge Inn and met Hannah's eyes across the bar for the first time in 10 years, and the first thing she said to me was,
It is you! You old slag!
I knew I could never play this game any other way. She calls you a slag and I absolutely love it. That is the most quintessentially British thing in the entire 2 games so far. What else are you going to call someone you haven't seen in 10 years? Nothing has ever been so perfect or so entertaining. That's all I needed. You catch up and reminisce on your time in the Spire, Hannah talking so much you can't get a word in, and because you can't talk. But that doesn't last long before she tells you she has a lead on the third hero, but before all that, urges you to reconnect with the people you've been away from this whole time. Which is why I like Hammer, she's so lovely, she's got her priorities right. Teresa barely said a word to you. Hammer calls you a slag, tells you how much she's missed you, and tells you the third hero can wait until you've done what you need to. You're urged to return to the Chamber of Fate to follow up on the lead of a third hero. If you remember, we saw Garth for the first time long ago after you were invited to Castle Fairfax when you first met Lucien. the night your sister was killed. Garth was just leaving. He addresses that here, having been told by Teresa who you really are and how you were involved in all of this. He apologises, sincerely. He had no idea what Lucien was planning. Garth has always presented himself as someone prideful, always in control, so to see him take a step back and apologise does a lot to build on his character. It's also great that they addressed this in-game. We did see Garth at the beginning. It's fair to wonder how much he knew and how much he was involved. It tarnishes the relationship he and the hero could have following Hammer's very sensible warning that Garth and Lucien used to work together. But that's all explained here. Garth is so sincere, so we believe him immediately. Plus, safe to say you'd been through enough together at this point that your time together in the Spire is more meaningful than walking past him once 20 years ago, so this is also dropped fairly quickly. Let bygones be bygones. They address this and we see a softer side of Garth, and that's all we need. Hammer returns to the chamber, delayed by having to avoid Lucien's men, and she and Garth meet for the first time. Hammer accuses him of being Lucien's lackey, and even though Teresa warned Garth that Hammer would be mistrustful, the two immediately just start digging into each other. It's understandable that Hammer would have her guard up towards Garth, even if it makes less sense for her to be this confrontational. Hammer knows why they're all here and that they're going to have to work together. It suits her character, the new Hammer that's been changed by her father's death and a new goal in life. But this is still nothing more than just an excuse to start an argument. Worse is Garth shooting back with this.
I was made to understand you might be mistrustful. I didn't anticipate your staggering wit and intellect.
Which is a ridiculous thing to say to someone who's only heard say 3 sentences, none of which make her seem stupid or slow in any way. In fact, she's just come back with information she's found out, arguably the clear opposite of what he's accusing her of. She threatens to smack him, but before things can escalate, Teresa steps in. Garth gets in one more dig, like spending more time at the pub is a bad thing, but then it moves on. This little argument is stupid, it comes out of nowhere and serves absolutely no purpose. It's forced and contrived. There isn't actually a real reason for there to be conflict between these two, certainly nothing that ought to get them at each other's throats so strongly and so quickly. Hammer has a right to be cautious and Garth has a right to defend himself, but that's it. This argument doesn't feel like it's serving any other purpose than artificial conflict just because one is brawny and one is brainy, and obviously those two archetypes always fight, so they have to have a little squabble here. The third hero is a pirate thief in the Bloodstone region of Albion. That's a cool sentence, pirate thief in Bloodstone. Garth points out, fairly, that being a pirate and capturing ships does not a hero make. Then we find our first concrete thing about Reaver, or the proof we need that we found our third hero.
Reaver takes down galleons with one bullet. High winds, rough seas, a mile away, doesn't matter. He picks off the captain. The more impossible the shot, the quicker the crew surrenders.
Which is objectively very impressive and, more importantly, very cool. Teresa warns us that Bloodstone is surrounded by marshes on all sides, so to get there we'll need to use a Cullis Gate. The one in the Chamber of Fate can only take us to Hero Hill. But Garth knows of another, his Cullis Gate at Brightwood Tower, which can get you to Wraith Marsh but presumably not directly into Bloodstone, which would have been nice but can't have everything. This also confirms that Garth does know about other Cullis Gates, but also perhaps why he couldn't use them. Why we were forced to Cullis only to the lower spire, because the other gates aren't charged up yet. The only minor setback here being that the tower is guarded by Lucien's men. With our obstacle in mind, we all agreed to work together and set off for the tower. The three of you enter Brightwood through the back. Hammer talks some more about how she spent the 10 years while you were in the spire, saying that she went back to the temple for a while, but she has nothing nice to say about her return. I'd say it's hard to pin down exactly what this is telling us about Hannah's character. Any development over the last 10 years, maybe an attempt by the game to deepen her feelings towards the life she was born into and that she abandoned. Hammer also says the temple monks get their doctrine from books written 1,000 years ago, disparaging how old they are. Garth interjects the moment Hammer is finished, disapproving of her opinion on anything so old. So this isn't about Hammer or her development, it's just an excuse to get Hammer and Garth at each other's throats again. This time though, it does make a good bit more sense. They're arguing about something, actually having a disagreement about their personal views, not just fighting because the game wants them to. We know that Garth is a historian with a keen interest in the Old Kingdom which fell 1,000 years ago, so Hannah dismissing anything so old would rub Garth the wrong way. Unfortunately, there's just no introductional cause for this. These two just dislike each other because the game says they do. They never built up any animosity, never had any disagreements, nothing ever happened to really get either of them to this place where their only interaction is to squabble. Even one scene of these two at least trying to be cordial, slowly devolving to the point where they clearly are not going to get along, would go a long way. Which is why this argument, this scene and interaction between these two doesn't work, because it's written like these two have built up their relationship enough to develop into them disliking each other. But the only scene we've had, not 5 minutes ago potentially, is them snapping at each other without provocation or reason. So this argument doesn't work either, it still feels contrived and unnatural, even when they do have something legitimate to argue over. There's no reason or need for these two to go at each other so keenly, like they've hated each other for ages, when they only met 2 minutes ago and have exchanged 4 sentences. However, Hammer does make a good point here, and one that Garth agrees with, so while the source of this argument is baseless, the outcome of it is positive. It would be great if this was the first step to them fixing their broken relationship, but they never took steps to break that relationship in the first place, so trying to fix what was artificially broken is unbelievably forced. The game never gives these two a good reason to hate each other, and never any development for the relationship to be this sour, but the game is now making them take strides to fix that relationship. How contrived. As far as I can tell, these two never argue again, so we're already done. No setup, no resolution. We put all differences aside as we approach the tower, accepting that the mission is more important, and the thing that unites all of you to stop Lucien is bigger than any of you individually and bigger than any disagreements, real or not. You and Hammer fight off guards and protect Garth as he charges up the Cullis Gate on the tower. Having our first real mission out of Sparrow involve these 3 heroes and forcing them to work together so much, regardless of how they feel about it, really cements the idea that you're coming together as a team and beginning to work together, that this quest will in fact require all of us to pull it off. And it's so good to see the whole team together and kicking ass. We fight the guards, protect Garth until the Cullis Gate is charged. All 3 step through and head into Wraith Marsh. Your dog arrives first and dashes off into the marsh. You appear at the teleportation spot when it suddenly turns red, knocking you unconscious. It's hard to say exactly what goes wrong here, but it looks like the Cullis Gate rebounds or something. There's clearly an issue with getting you here, which is pretty believable from a Cullis Gate that's not been used for who knows how long. You fall unconscious on the portal floor where you were found by some random bloke who appears the moment you pass out, like his job is to watch for unconscious people. We hear Teresa's distorted voice trying to reach us, but it's too late. Old Greg has found us. And no way that isn't a Mighty Boosh reference, man, I miss the Mighty Boosh. We wake in Old Greg's cage. He can't find our dog, but laughingly assures us the Banshees will have him by now. He talks about Bloodstone, and the moment he's finished, a wall of fog appears right to the edge of the cage. And Old Greg decides the best thing to do about that is to head into the thickest part. We only hear him begging and a horrible scream that cuts him off. That scream would be real effective for real blood-curdling horror, accompanied by the unnatural fog that rolled in so quickly, all while we're trapped in this cage with nowhere to go. Except we've just been told exactly what it is. I don't know what this game's problem is with letting the player naturally find things out. It so rarely lets you wonder at a single thing. It has to explain everything to you beforehand. It's a big reason why so much of a story that should work just doesn't. It happens with the Ruckridge Bridge, it happens here with this new enemy, it happens later with the Court of Shadows. The one time that it doesn't happen, with the twist of a white Balverine, is incredible. It really is. It sets up so many expectations of where we're going, what's happening, what's about to happen. And then the twist is that it's not only a white Balverine, but that they can change form now, and now you're both in real trouble. Imagine if before you meet this woman, Teresa mutters in your ear, "Be careful, white Balverines sometimes pretend to be lost victims on the road." And imagine how much that would suck the joy out of that quest, that reveal, and that fight with the white Balverine and the other Balverines. That's exactly what happens here and in many other places. It takes what could be a cool reveal, an enjoyable surprise, and minimises it to boring exposition. It doesn't even feel like the problem is that Fable doesn't trust you, just that it doesn't care to try and do cool reveals. Maybe it is that the game doesn't trust you to realise that the scream we just heard is from a Banshee we're about to meet for the first time. Hell, this even makes that encounter soulless because it's not confirming or revealing anything we haven't been told. We don't hear a scream with no idea who or what it is and then finally see this horror. Seeing this enemy for the first time isn't their reveal, it's just this bloke talking to us through a cage. The fog rolls back and Teresa can talk to us now. She explains the Cullis Gate malfunctioned and confirms Hannah and Garth were sent back to the guild. It's not explained how we made it through but the others didn't, but this isn't really a problem, it's fine. Teresa warns us about the fog, which could cut her off from being able to talk to us, which would honestly be a godsend. If Old Greg hadn't already warned us it was a Banshee, she absolutely would. Instead, she says the fog here is unnatural, which would be a great lead-in, a great moment to up the tension and fear of what is out there, if that wasn't already spoiled for us. So, as it is, there's no tension, there's no fear and no horror. Which is a shame because Wraith Marsh continues to do what Fable is excellent for doing, which is expanding the world, making it larger, and making every new location feel so visually and atmospherically distinct. Wraith Marsh is a wonder of an oppressive, closed-in atmosphere that just looks and feels so terrifyingly haunted. It's so great to be here because it's like anything could happen, that anything could be lurking around the corner. It's magnificent world building and continues to cement one of the things that Fable is always great at. Albion is alive and changing, growing, morphing. Even this late in the game, it throws it in our face that we've got so much more to see. Both games deserve so much credit for this. Our dog hands us the key for the jail cell, even though it's not the pry bar we asked for, and we escape into Wraithmarsh. You'll never guess what we encounter out here. Surprise! It's a Banshee. Could never have seen that coming. I'll stop being cynical now because there are some things here I really want to talk about. Wading through these waters to look up and instantly recognise this bridge is wonderful. It's one of the best parts of the game. To look up and realise what Wraithmarsh really is, what it used to be. To look to the side and recognise the field where our ancestor stood 500 years ago with Teresa. What an exciting callback, what a great way to connect these two games. Bowerstone survived, Albion changed, and Oakvale has turned into this. The Barrow Fields where we once exited after the Darkwood into the bright sunshine and cheer is now what we just waded through. Teresa tells us that the whole town was sacrificed by a young man, all his family, friends, acquaintances, the entire town gone, to buy his eternal youth, which sounds remarkably similar to someone we're about to meet. We can also find two graves here, one is for Brom, the hero of Oakvale's father, and the other is for Rosie, who's the teddy bear, not the girl. I'm messed up, I know, I called her Rosie. I actually played through the first game, wrote and recorded the script for the first video, but it was me finding this grave for Rosie the teddy bear that made me realise I had messed up. You arrive in Bloodstone and are told to go to the largest house to meet Reaver. We encounter Reaver posing for a sculptor in his stately manor house, enveloped by Stephen Fry's sticky sweet salutations. Reaver will send you away if you don't have enough renown, but he will admit to knowing you escaped the Spire, which is infinitely more impressive than anything else we're going to do. Escaping the Spire wasn't enough, but clearing out a cave of Hobbs is going to make all the difference. The main quest could potentially cut us out and send us away again, but that wasn't a problem in this playthrough. Reaver tells us for all the impressive things we've done, we haven't done anything that benefited him, which is just such beautiful solipsism. What a great way to introduce a character. Reaver says that once we've done him a favour, he'll help us on our little errand, whatever it may be, a little quid pro quo arrangement. Reaver gives us a good reason for why he can't do this and why his other lackeys can't do it, but if alarm bells aren't ringing for you already, then you're not picking up what Fable is clearly putting down regarding Reaver. There's so much honey in his perfectly rendered elocution, he makes it sound too good to be anything but a trap or a farce or a ruse, at the least an outright lie. We have no reason to mistrust Reaver, at least not directly, and there's nothing in this request that makes it sound outright dangerous, not like our life is on the line. We just have to drop off an item. Sounds easy enough, he certainly makes it sound easy enough. We know that Reaver is a terror on the seas, but here, in his mansion, that sounds almost reasonable. He's a narcissist, that's clear before he's even opened his mouth. Of course we aren't going to get anything for free from a man like this. So if we're willing to do Hammer the favour of guarding her in the cave, and Garth the ordeal of breaking him out of a spire, being there what he breaks us out of a spire, then we can drop off an item for Reaver. So while alarm bells might be ringing for the player, I don't think this is an indictment on the intelligence of the hero of Bower Lake to fall for Reaver's trap. They've come this far after all, and there's nothing overtly suspicious about this request, certainly not on paper. However you feel, even if everything he exudes screams to the player that this isn't a man to be trusted, we have no choice. That's a lot of words to indirectly talk about how perfectly they introduce Reaver and how strong his characterization is, just from what we see before he even talks. The town he runs, the mansion he lives in, and that he's spending his free time posing for a sculpture. And only when he talks does all of that come together in an expression of greed and sheer narcissism, with a huge amount of charisma, largely in part to Stephen Fry, that focuses his character and keeps him interesting and surprisingly endearing, without ever even getting close to annoying or off-putting. Reaver is so many people's favourite character, and it's immediately obvious why. My personal preference is still a Hammer, just because she's so lovely and we need her kindness, and Reaver turns out to be a bit of a prick. Reaver is still what I wish more characters were, fun. He's a fun character in a way that no one else in the game quite is. He's so lovable but such an asshole, his calm confidence is sheer arrogance. He's so petty and in control, and we love him. Even after everything he does to us, he remains such a compelling character. It's so hard to hate him, even when we absolutely should. And the game does such a commendable job creating a character so objectively unlikable, then managing to pull off making him everyone's favourite. The favour he needs requires us to take a seal back to Wraithmarsh, and when we pick it up and it's called Reaver's Dark Seal, that does set off significantly more alarm bells. If this needs returning to its owner, why does it have Reaver's name on it? A Dark Seal is obviously something evil, and Reaver is so casual about all of this. But to get him on board, we only have one way forward. Reaver has us cornered, because of course he does. This was never going to go any other way. We are told it was the Shadow Court who destroyed Oakvale, but the history doesn't go too much deeper than that. Even without knowing this specifically about Oakvale, we've been through Wraithmarsh, we know the vibe there. So delivering something called the Dark Seal to the Shadow Court in a drowned place called Wraithmarsh isn't exactly the game being subtle that something more is going on. As we leave, the door behind us is closed and we hear Reaver comment on the statue, then shoot the sculptor. Just to demonstrate how little he cares about any life other than his own. Playing through the game, I was mostly fine with Teresa's constant interjections. For the most part, they aren't a huge problem. This is where that changed. Teresa's interruption is so egregious here it made me retroactively hate nearly everything she ever said. This is where Teresa crossed the line from being slightly annoying, but nothing cumbersome, into outright spoiler territory.
Be careful. There is more to this task than Reaver lets on.
It didn't fully ruin the game, but it did tarnish her character, at least in Fable 2. Why is she here to do nothing more than point out the obvious and ruin every quest for us? It's one thing for us to mistrust Reaver, to fully believe there's more going on with Reaver's request than he's let on, to have our guard up expecting a twist. And it's another for Teresa to just up and say, yeah, 100% there's more going on. Why won't the game let us find that out for ourselves? Why can't Teresa just let things play out without warning us of everything we already expect for ourselves and more, would greatly enjoy discovering for ourselves? It's an issue Fable 2 maintains its entire runtime and that Teresa is more guilty of causing than most. There's so little in this game that surprises us at any single point, not because the game doesn't have surprises, but because we're just point blank told what is going to happen before the reveal. I cannot fathom why Fable 2 does this, not at any of the multiple points it does so. It makes for bad story and bad storytelling, but, maybe worse, it makes for a poorer player experience. This one line kills any intrigue this quest may have had, because there's now so much less to discover. You don't even get to wonder if anything really is going to happen. The game point blank tells you there is. So many of the enemies and moments in the game are revealed before we get to them in-game. The Chamber of Fate is ruined before we arrive there. The man outside the cave talks about hobs, but even before that the cave is called Hob Cave. The game doesn't spoil bandits or spire guards, but those are basic ass enemies and don't count. It's fair to assume that human enemies are a given. It doesn't spoil the Hollow Men, it doesn't spoil the Spire Shard, not directly, which is great. Hannah talks about Balverines, but that's one of the few times this reveal adds more to the game than it takes away. It doesn't give away trolls, but the main problem with trolls is that they're boring to fight, so this reveal wouldn't make any difference. Old Greg ruined the Banshees for us in literally the last main quest. There are two issues here. The first is the game spoiling moments, like that returning the Dark Seal is obviously not going to be a simple delivery job. Second is the game ruining upcoming enemies before we see them, and that issue boils down to one thing and really one thing only. Because introducing enemies before we meet them is only a spoiler if you have played the first game. If you have not played the first game, then this is going to be the opposite, and rather than spoiling anything, they're the first tease that you're about to meet something exciting. If you've never played a Fable game, you have no idea what a hob even could be, nor a Balverine. Your introduction to hobs is that this man is too afraid to encounter them, that Balverines infect and turn humans, and that's a wonderful setup before the inevitable fight. But if you have played the first game, there's no surprise for you, there's no moment for you to see a hob in the game for the first time and get pumped for their return, because you already knew the moment you stepped onto this beach and read the text. Which makes this a really hard point to criticise, because it's impossible to say if this is a flaw within the game. I don't know if the developers wanted this to be a little advantage to returning players knowing what was coming, and a tease for new players, but I don't think this works for returning players. Naturally, meeting enemies as we explore would be a far more exciting introduction to them. The game hypes up nearly every enemy when you first fight them, because they want the first time you come across a new enemy type to be impactful. But for those who have played the first game, being told this is a hob doesn't mean anything when we already know we're about to see hobs. I don't have a satisfactory answer to this because I can't pretend like I haven't played the first game. I think this is a mistake from a game, but have to conclude, at least for the enemies, that's just my opinion. I would love to know what you think. Ruining game moments not just for Shadow Court is a point-blank problem that Fable 2 is guilty of from start to finish. From our first quest being told we have to jump before we get to explore other options and slowly realise we have none, through to even the appearance of a great shard at the end of the game, Teresa says that's out there too. This has nothing to do with players returning from Fable 1 because this problem exists entirely within Fable 2. This isn't a nitpick, this isn't a small thing that I'm bringing up because I'm being hard on Fable. These are outright spoilers that detract from the experience of the story in every way, at every level, in nearly every quest. The Shadow Court brings us back to where Oakvale stood, back to the field where the hero of Oakvale saw bandits attacking and where they took Teresa. We used the seal to enter the Shadow Court, even though you were told this is what you'd be dropping off, not using it as a key, which should also be of concern. Inside the Shadow Court, you hear a woman crying, and you can hear this the whole way through as you venture down towards the court. This puts us instantly in mind of the last time we were in a creepy dungeon with a woman and she turned out to be a white Balverine. It would be nice to say you wander down curious but guarded, intrigued but untrusting, but really, Teresa has killed any interest in this quest or our inherent wonder if there really is any twist at the end of this to do with the crying woman, because Teresa has already directly told us that something more is going to happen. So while this quest and location does its best to make us uneasy, to have us curious and worried, none of that is warranted. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, but we know it's going to be something. So fighting through the court to reach the crying feels like nothing more than a by-the-books jaunt through any other thing Fable has to offer. Whatever atmosphere this place builds, and it is great for that, is undermined because our expectations as the audience are shot. We're told not to wonder at this place, not to reach our own conclusions, not to ask our own questions and attempt to clue out the answers. Teresa just tells us that more is going to happen. Worse, this makes it feel like there's no point in asking questions or wondering at anything. Simply, if Teresa doesn't say anything, then we know there's nothing to be found, else she would have told us. If she does say something, then we know what to expect. It's so backwards. This whole thing could have been such a cool quest in such a fascinating location with such a horror movie vibe and setup, and it's all whisked away from us before the quest even starts. Which is a crying shame, pun intended. Because this part of the game is truly excellent, definitely up there as one of the best moments Fable 2 has to offer and the last really interesting choice our protagonist is faced with. More on most choices when we get to them. At the bottom of the court we find a young woman crying. She tells us she and her friends were reading from an old book when there was a flash of white light and she woke up here. We're just going to move past what she stays here crying and doesn't try to escape. It's fine. Maybe she did try. The court themselves appear and bid us welcome. They reveal why we're really here. Whoever is holding the Dark Seal will surrender their youth and vitality to be given to the King of Thieves, to Reva. Reva has betrayed us, and this would be annoying if it wasn't so impressive. This just works within the narrative on so many levels, to mess us over, to cement Reva's character, to show how little he really thinks of us and those around him. The sort of man Reva really is. Bastard, what a good decision. Reva's such an asshole, what a great quest. And now you're trapped here with this poor young woman who has no idea what's going on, and you have a choice of whose vitality the court are going to take by keeping the Dark Seal to yourself or passing it off to her. Out of every choice we're given in Fable 2, this one is the most difficult. This one doesn't sap our experience points, it won't change the story in any way, we're not losing or gaining anything real impactful whether we keep or surrender our youth. This isn't a choice posed to us as affecting mechanics or gameplay, this is a purely roleplay decision. Of course this decision still lands on opposite ends of the spectrum, there's a clear good and clear bad decision here, and it can be reduced, as many other choices made in this game, to just going with whatever alignment you've decided on for your playthrough. Most of these decisions are made before you even begin the game, but for the big decisions that doesn't change how impactful they are. This is one of those decisions, but this one sticks out even more. If we disobeyed the Commandant and lose XP, it's nothing we can't turn back. We can always get into more fights to reclaim what was taken. Making evil choices when necessary can also be turned around in multiple ways and our moral standing regained. None of that is true here. The game makes it clear what you're sacrificing. This is a change that will affect your character for the rest of the playthrough. But can you have wandered down here to find this young woman who wound up here by accident, who wants nothing more than to go home to her parents, and then make the decision to sacrifice her? At least Reva sent you down here. At least you were meant to be the sacrifice. I imagine there's a cohort of players who love this quest when they get to it because they're determined to make their characters as ugly and scary as possible. I can't say if this choice is so difficult for everyone, but I think it is, or definitely up there as one of the more difficult. This decision shouldn't be more difficult than killing our friend, but you could argue that was the best thing for him. Is this the best thing for us? That's the difficulty with this decision, because both of these options are absolutely abysmal. We can't make the decision to rob this woman of her youth and vitality, but can we take it upon ourselves to lose our own? Do we care so much about this woman, a stranger who was only here because she was messing with something she probably shouldn't have been? Both of those choices are terrible, and damn Reva to hell and back for forcing it on us. Reva's such a good character. The evil thing is great for us but terrible for this woman. The supposedly good thing is great for her, but absolutely terrible for us and entirely permanent. Damn you, Reaver, but great job, Fable. This choice is so good. Ultimately, we're the hero. Reaver sent us here, and we still need him to stop Lucien. We know what the right choice is, even though it sucks. It's not like we were a great looker to begin with. We're told that Reaver has again fulfilled the bargain, so we know he's done this before multiple times. All the more reason to get back and pummel him to death. Teresa warns us that once we confront Reaver, and confront him we bloody well shall, that our path will lead us straight to Lucien, so once we go back to Reaver we're locking ourselves into the endgame. We make it back to Bloodstone and return to Reaver as he's posing, this time to have his picture taken by Barnum, who we've seen a few times in the game. He's there way back in the Bowerstone slums when you and Rose were looking to make some money. We see him on another main quest to clear bandits out of Rookridge so the bridge to Bowerstone can be rebuilt, and he gives us his Thesaurus. He asks you to join him as an investment partner into Westcliff, an opportunity that genuinely pays dividends if you take it. When Reaver clarifies that the picture will look like him, but that it will take 3 months to develop. This is honestly horrendous. Barnum has been with us from the start and Reaver just doesn't care. Barnum deserves so much better than this, and he died just because Reaver couldn't wait for 3 months. This is genuinely one of the worst deaths in the game. Man, poor Barnum, he deserved better. Just in case you haven't caught on yet, or just in case you needed that extra little push to really nail down who Reaver is, especially if you didn't keep the Dark Seal, it's so funny that this is just the game saying, Reaver just sent you to lose all of your youth, but just in case that wasn't enough, here's him murdering an innocent man over something petty. Unfazed by the murder he just committed, Reaver reveals his actual plan, what he's been doing while we were away fighting our conscience on who to commit to eternal and premature old age so Reaver could remain forever youthful. He's ratted us out to Lucien. The way he says this is so great though, it's still all about him. It's what he thought and what he's done and what he's getting out of it, and how good and smart he is for figuring this out and getting his own payday at the end of it. You have to love to hate this guy, what an absolutely sheer asshole that we 100% need. After all of this, we still need to keep him around and keep him alive. That the game can drive us through so much conflict over one character that ultimately has to boil down to taking whatever he throws at us because we can't leave without him is one of the best things the game does. Reaver has such strong characterization in everything he does, in everything he says and in every single one of his actions. An explosion rocks us from our conversation and some random bloke tells us that an army of Lucien's men is attacking Bloodstone, looking for Reaver. Lucien can't and doesn't find Reaver, Reaver brings Lucien to him. Which is odd because Lucien knows he needs to find the other 3 heroes. He finds Garth, which was easy enough, he knew who Garth was and where he hung out, in a giant tower. He finds Hammer, a random monk in a random town, so why can't he find Reaver? This seems quite cool until you think about it. Like, Reaver doesn't want to be found so he won't be, but Reaver isn't hiding. Lucien can't find the hero of skill with all of his resources, but Hammer finds him just asking around a few watering holes. We know Lucien has ramped up his search for Hammer and Garth, how does he not find even a sniff of Reaver, the most famous individual in Bloodstone, until Reaver overplays his hand and gives himself away. Anyway, even as he's moving to his escape hatch, he's mortified that Lucien is looking for him. Of course he's only indignant when his gentlemanly agreements backfire on him, but at least he recognises he was betraying us. He's a narcissist and a sociopath, but at least he's aware of it. Before I started the game, I thought Fable 2's best joke was at the start with Murgo and the mirror, but I was wrong, it's here. It's literally just that the escape tunnel is called Reaver's Rear Passage. Honestly, I paused the game and put down the controller because I was laughing so hard. Then when I unpaused it, the name was still on screen, so I paused and had to laugh again. I can't berate Fable for having childish humour when it makes me laugh so hard, because I am also, apparently, a child. I am exactly Fable's target audience. We've just been betrayed, Lucien's men are coming after us, blowing up Bloodstone, so we have to make a daring escape with a man who just admitted to selling us out for money. And I'm just laughing at the name of this stupid escape tunnel. I'm still laughing. I wrote in the script that I was still laughing, and I'm still laughing as I do the voiceover. We fight our way through, stopping perhaps to think that there's so many men in Reaver's rear passage, following Reaver to his escape ship. Reaver tells us that the tunnels haven't been used in centuries, then corrects himself, revealing that he is over 200 years old. His life and vitality are naturally elongated by his deal with the Shadow Court. They told us this had happened multiple times, but now we have an idea for the centuries this has been going on. We reach the tunnel's exit and escape onto the beach and see Hammer and Garth waiting for the two of us. Hammer is pure Hammer, excited to see us and glad we're safe. Reaver blows up a tunnel so nothing else can come out of his rear passage, then promptly tells us all he's leaving on his escape ship. Our attention is drawn to the shoreline on a huge spire shard which immediately blows up Reaver's escape ship. The great spire shard descends on the 4 of us, 5 with your dog, and sends in more men to kill us. You wouldn't know it, but this is actually the final boss fight of the game. I remember being so surprised and disappointed the first time I played the game. Even now that I'm older, and knowing this is the final fight, it's still such a surprise and such a huge letdown. Mechanically this isn't a great fight, but narratively it's far worse. There's 2 reasons for this: how suddenly this crept up on us out of nowhere, and how awful this end boss is for the story. We've been warned that we're heading into the end game, but we don't expect that to fall on us, arguably before we've even gotten Reaver safely out of Bloodstone. It feels like there should be a string of choices, a line of events that lead us from Reaver to Lucien, but there isn't. We're just ambushed by more of the same enemies and told we have to fight. It still feels like this is a mini-boss to cap off saving Reaver, the last enemy in the Bloodstone attack, and not the final boss of the actual game. Worse, much worse, is that this enemy, the Great Spire Shard, isn't a real enemy. It's nothing. Sure, it's sent by Lucien, who is nowhere, but it's not like this shard means anything to us. I said the Commandant was a great minor antagonist and a great boss to fight at the end of a Spire. His character and role in the story is built up, and we're given lots of reasons through the game to want to fight and kill him. It's the same for Lucien. This Spire Shard isn't a character, has never been in a game before, and means nothing to us. This has 0 connection to the characters and nothing to do with the actual story or narrative of Fable 2 in any way. And that would be less of a problem for a mini-boss at the end of a quest, but this is the last fight in the whole game and the game's final boss. Let's be generous and take this to mean that for Lucien to send out such a huge shard, where before it was only the smaller shards, means the Spire is either finished or very close to being finished. But this isn't really that. This is such a meaningless, nothing fight. We have no reason to care about this enemy or any of this at any point. We shouldn't feel the same way about the endgame boss as we do about encountering bandits along the road. This isn't the end of the game. Of course we have an encounter with Lucien, but this is the end of the gameplay. This should be our last huge challenge before we get to face Lucien once and for all. And it's just some asshole rock and more of the same enemy types we've been fighting through the game and who we were fighting 5 seconds ago to get here. This is bad, it's so bad. Of course it doesn't feel like the end of a game. Of course we're surprised that this is all it is. This is disappointing on every level. There are moments here that shine through in the banter of the 3 heroes fighting together for the first time. I initially wrote 4, but Sparrow's banter is sorely lacking, and fighting alongside one another towards a common goal. That all looks and feels exactly as it should, but the fight itself is poor. This game has absolutely no real antagonists. There's the Commandant who's great but one and done. There's maybe Reaver who's fantastic but who we met 3 minutes ago and we're now at the end of the game. And Lucien? We'll talk about Lucien when we get to Hero Hill. Anyone else? No one comes to mind. This should have been the game ramping us up towards that final confrontation with Lucien. Instead it's just a pointless, boring fight that hasn't had anything leading into it, comes out of nowhere, has 0 stakes to it whatsoever and does nothing to progress the main story or characters in any way. And when it's done, that's it, it's just finished, whatever. The one thing this succeeds at doing is stopping Reaver from escaping and forcing him to stay with us. Not that this should have been a fight with Lucien or even a confrontation with Lucien, but it should have been something more. It could, at the very least, feel like an endgame boss and not a minor hitch on the road, and I hate saying that. The combat in this game is good, the lack of enemy variety is never a huge problem. The other bosses in this game are enjoyable, except the trolls who can do one. This isn't a problem with the game's combat lacking depth because it doesn't, it's just a poorly designed and written fight. With the shard no longer pulling the game down, Teresa appears to recruit Reaver. There's a bit of dialogue and it's good the game doesn't spend so long for Teresa to convince Reaver to join. Of course Reaver wouldn't want to come, but we and the game know he has to give in. So drawing this out when it was inevitable would have really dragged. Only by convincing him that if Lucien kills everyone by blowing up the Spire in Albion, so Reaver won't have anyone to sacrifice to the King of Shadows, does he finally consent to go with Teresa and come aboard. Reaver's callousness towards Teresa's blindness is also very funny and very in character.
Blind, eh? I would have preferred mute.
He takes her hand, as she did the other 2, and we finally arrive, the 4 of us, at Hero Hill. I just want to recap what we went through to recruit Reaver. He gave us a seal, we lost our youth, fought to escape after we called Lucien, and then defeated a rock. The game has given up on the idea that you are important to these quest lines so hard that in this quest, you don't actually have to do anything. You have to deliver the seal, but you don't even have to take the consequences of falling for Reaver's trap. Anyone could have delivered the seal, anyone could have lost their vitality for Reaver. Anyone could have fought their way through Reaver's rear passage and defeated the shard. I can't read Reaver's rear passage without laughing. Oh, I'm such a child. Again, at least anyone who could fight. This means nothing to the hero of Bower Lake. None of this had to be us doing it. It could have been anyone, and it all would have been the exact same. The hero could have hired someone else and stayed in bed. No part of this means anything to them, except as a chance to use Reaver to take a shot at Lucien. But to get here, nothing. The same as it was for Hammer, the same as it was for Garth. We mean nothing in this story. Having said that, to have lost the opportunity to meet 3 excellent, well-written, fascinating characters with their own interesting issues and worldviews, that is too much to miss out on, and it makes every poor thing this game offers worth it 100 times over. We are a nothing protagonist, but the characters in this game are, through and through, sublime. Hammer is a good person down to her core, with a sturdy view of the world. Garth is a scholar and a powerhouse, with his own history with Lucien. Reaver is the character you love to hate and who is so effortlessly selfish you come right back around to respecting it, plus Stephen Fry. So we could make the argument that we aren't the main character in this story. This story isn't about us, we're the Watson to these 3 Sherlock Holmes, tagging along here to write and document their story. Fable 3 sort of disproves that, but in Fable 2 that's a good way to look at it. We're the sturdy lighthouse on the shore guiding these 3 to their destiny. I want to believe that's true, and while these 3 are heroes, they don't have the same bloodline as us. They can't master the 3 disciplines like we do, and they aren't able to summon the weapon that we can as the conflicts of the 3 disciplines. We are supposed to be the most important person in this story, because we're the only one who can really stop Lucien from using the Spire, even if we aren't the only one who can kill him. Killing him is less important than stopping him using the Spire, which isn't a bad thing. So while it's a perfectly acceptable angle to view the story through, that we just enable these 3 heroes to fulfill their own destiny, as they were always meant to, our own destiny always was the more important. We were always the main character, but we do nothing to drive the story, not at any single point, and we do nothing that no one else could have done. We achieve nothing that truly sets us apart, and we have made no decisions that impact Albion in any way. Most of that is about to change.
The last time I killed you, it tore my heart out. Of course, you're only a child. But then, so was I.
We stand, with Teresa and our dog, the 3 heroes and you, at the circle of heroes on the top of Hero Hill. Reaver kicks us off by asking what it is that Lucien wants. It's fine that Reaver is here and willing to oblige, if not happily, then at least peacefully. It would drag the game out perhaps too much for him to fight against us so hard, but on the other hand, to have gotten here so quickly feels rushed. We do so little for Reaver and then we're just at the end of the game. So while the game is making the best decision to rush Reaver into aiding us, they also had a lot more room to develop him into joining and helping us a bit more willingly to pad out this ending, to really lead us into the endgame and up the ante, to increase the stakes and make it feel like this is the finale. But they don't. Garth answers saying Lucien wanted to resurrect his family, his deceased wife Helena and daughter Amelia, but says that was back when Garth knew him. He goes on to say that if Lucien has this power, it will far outstrip his desire to use it only to resurrect his family. Because Lucien is so absent from a game and we haven't seen him in so long, the game has to remind us what his reason was, at least initially, for doing all of this and what our motivation is for needing to stop him, because that was established so long ago and hasn't been built on in the slightest. This wouldn't be a problem if Lucien was in the game more, so there we go. This might also be the first mention in the entire game that we've been told his motivations have gone beyond wanting to resurrect his family. Teresa tells you that you represent the 3 hero disciplines of strength, will and skill and combine them all together, and that all of you can call forth a weapon capable of defeating Lucien. Their powers merge into you, bathing you in white light. When the ritual is finished, everyone is on their knees out of breath. Hammer is the only one not on the ground, which is a nice touch. She would have the highest constitution modifier. The ritual apparently hurt and weakened them, though it seemed to do the opposite to us. We are, however, trapped inside our pedestal, and Teresa has gone. Spire shards descend on the 4 heroes, 3 in their weakened state and the 4th one trapped, and Lucien appears to confront us. This is a huge part of the game and what I'm really going to dig into, so I want to recap this cutscene before getting into the analysis. This is the first time Hammer has seen Lucien, so that's all she says. Garth tries to convince Lucien to stop, warning him the ruins of the Old Kingdom are all around us, saying that Lucien will destroy everything all over again. Lucien only says he will rebuild over this kingdom with his new one and he will be king. Reva tells Lucien their deal still stands, trying to worm his way out of the situation by giving up the hero of Bower Lake and the other two heroes. Hammer tells him to shut up, which is perfect, but Lucien only says he will be taking all of them. Hammer asks where Teresa is, what he's done with her, but he says only, I merely listened. Everyone is zapped away to the spire, leaving only you and Lucien alone on the hill. He tells you he should have gone out to find your body that night when he tried to kill you, but he regrets not doing so. He tells us how much you have flourished since that night, languishing in the heroic bloodline that flows through your veins. He tells us the last of that bloodline will flow on this hilltop, adding just how that blood now splatters the wall of your family home, that your spouse and children are dead. Unlike last time, he personally ensured that was the case. He pulls the trigger just as your dog leaps in front of a gun, taking the bullet instead. With a final howl of pain, your faithful companion is killed. Lucien tells us that the last time he killed you, it tore his heart out, but only because you were a child, finishing his monologue by concluding that so was he. He says nothing about your sister. Then he shoots you between the eyes. What Hammer says to Lucien means very little, it's why she says the least. She just remarks she's never seen Lucien before. Garth's comments are far more interesting, and this is where the problem starts. I love a lot about this scene, it's arguably Lucien's best, but this is equally, perhaps, the one scene in the game that caps off and proves every issue with this story and, most importantly, with the antagonist. Before this moment, Reva asks what Lucien wants, and we get our first hint, the first real time that the game tells us, that Lucien's ambition might outreach his goal of bringing back his family. Lucien doesn't tell us this, the game doesn't make this clear. This is a rushed guess from Garth, because Lucien has had so little development in the game as to be zero. He gave a speech in the Spire about death and that's it. So the game needs to super quickly throw it out there that Lucien is worse than he was before. This isn't natural growth, we don't see that, we don't experience it, the game just throws in that Lucien is more evil now, mentioning for the first time that his goals have outgrown the one goal the game has been about this entire time, and we just have to accept the game is telling the truth. Lucien doesn't get any development, but the game wants you to believe he's more tyrannical than he's ever actually shown as being, just to artificially up the ante here. Because that's all this is, it's artificial, it's randomly inserted, just so we have a stronger need to stop Lucien. Because for the entire game, the past in-game 20 years, our one motivation has been revenge for our sister. And the game is either thinking that's not enough, or wants to up the stakes here at the 11th hour. If Lucien was in the game even a tiny bit more, this could have happened naturally. They could have actually developed him past just being an excuse to drive us through the game, but he never is. Fable recognises that and tries to fix it now. The entire game, Lucien's sole motivation has been to bring back his family. It's the one thing that drives his actions at the beginning of the game, forcing him to kill you and Rose. But now the game turns around and says actually there's more. We haven't seen it, it's never been there before, but trust us, there's more. Lucien wants ultimate power. Which Lucien confirms to Garth, telling him he's okay with destroying the existing world to rebuild it anew with him as king. First we're hearing of this, first we're hearing he wants anything more than the one thing he's wanted in the entire game. If the game had stuck to just his one motivation, that small and very personal motivation of wanting his family back, to return to his life as mayor of Bowerstone, this would have been fine. The stakes would have been lower, but that would have meant so much more and so much more to us. How dare Lucien kill the one family member we have in his goal of bringing back his own family? Why does he get to take our family but then get his own back? But this game isn't about that anymore. It's blank, generic, I want all the power in the world. And it comes out of nowhere. This is bad writing. This is the game realising that now we're at the end, the stakes are too low, so they need to inflate them however they can into a real threat. But without setup, without warning, without any lead into that need from Lucien, this all falls flat. Imagine if they had done any of this instead of making us fight a stupid triangle. Even this monologue of Aspire was about wanting to put an end to death, which is still just about his wife and daughter. This is a weak villain being given bad lines because his motivation wasn't strong enough, but the writers realised that too late, or Lucien was too absent from a game to actually show his motivations had grown or changed. His motivations could have moved years before now, or in the 10 years we were in Aspire, but we'll never know. The game never tells us. Suddenly he wants more than just his family, he wants ultimate power. It's wild because this cutscene is probably the best in the game too. The opening cinematic is way more shocking and impactful, but as far as the impact on the wider story, this is a much bigger moment. It's the first time we've been alone with Lucien since we were a child, since he killed Rose and shot us out of a window. What he does tell us is great, it really begins to set him up as a hardline villain that needs stopping. But this is literally the end of the game. We've seen Lucien once in Aspire, where he chatted some vague nonsense about cheating death that meant nothing to the hero, nor did it change that relationship in any way. This is the first and only time in this game that being a silent protagonist is a real disappointment, because to have both sides of this conversation, alone with Lucien atop Hero Hill, would have been a real treat. We get so much out of Lucien, even if it doesn't build on him massively, it still builds on him enough. It dives into his character, his motivations. We see how much he's changed in 20 years and how much he stayed the same. Imagine if we had seen this more throughout the game, real moments with Lucien that allowed him to develop, his motivations to evolve, his mind to wither and snap. The relationship between Sparrow and Lucien to change and morph, still with Rose's murder at the centre of all of it. If that was the case, then Lucien would by far be the best antagonist in this entire trilogy. He has that potential. But really, in the entire game, this is the only moment we get that, when it's far too late. Lucien is exactly what this game needs. The story is never awful, but it's never great. It's fine. The characters are often great, but only in very specific ways at very specific times, so that's fine. Lucien is great when we see him, but we almost never see him, so he's just fine. Everything about him is middle of the line, like almost everything in this narrative is middle of the line. But please, let me make clear, Lucien is a good antagonist let down by questionable writing and poor motivation, and because the developers don't trust that motivation to stand alone and speak for itself. Fable 2's is the best opening in the series and perhaps the best introduction to its villain, but then Lucien gets nothing more. He's fine, but he could have been great, and that's the most disappointing thing about him. Lucien tells us this.
Your husband and children are dead.
This sounds horrific, it sounds awful, like it should cement Lucien as the worst antagonist ever. To kill our family, our young children. Thinking about this at all for more than 1 second, this is by and far the worst line in the entire game, because it's meaningless and, far, far worse, it's cheap. Because this has nothing to do with our family, this has nothing to do with Lucien. This is just set up for our wish at the end of the game. Lucien doesn't need to care about our bloodline, only about us. He started this with a prophecy he would be stopped, but once he's activated the Spire, he's set. Your children aren't going to do anything. There's no real reason for him to go after our family, except to make him sound like even more of a big meanie, and to set up your free wishes. And it's cheap because it happens off-screen. Lucien could be lying, what do we know? That you can wish your family back at the end of the game proves he isn't, but we don't know that now. This could be something he says just to mock you before killing you, to send you into eternity horrified over the death of your loved ones. It's cheap because it's said to us right before we're shot, with nothing to indicate this was ever going to happen. It's just thrown in because it needed to happen. And it's cheap because even though it's too late, the writers want to make Lucien feel like he might be a real villain. Because we need more of a reason to kill him, because the game doesn't trust us to think he's evil enough based on just the sister he killed 20 years ago. And in all the time since then, he's done nothing else to us. I know the whole slavery and people killed to build the Spire, but if anyone cared about that, then it could stand by itself, and Lucien wouldn't have had to kill your family to seem like more of a villain. This is the most meaningless way to kill your family, off-screen, right before being shot, and in a way that makes it almost mean nothing to us. It doesn't move the story along, it doesn't change a single thing, though it might make a change later. It's an unimpactful moment that should be the most impactful thing in the game. It's one thing to lose our sister, and at least we see that, at least we get to revel in the horror of watching that happen, but it's another to lose our spouse and our children. But the game really doesn't care. This is a quick line, almost randomly thrown in to try to raise the stakes, to make Lucien a stronger villain, and to give impetus and consequences to the wish we're about to make. And God knows we'll get to the damn wishes. But this does nothing for the character, nothing for the world, and a blanket nothing for the story. And I'll be fair, because I'm conflicted in the suggestion of making this more than it is now. Because at the moment, at least it's quick and it's over. I get this game goes to some dark places, more so than the first one I think. But going anywhere near having your family executed is way too dark and way too real for Fable. This all just boils down to it being too late in the game to try and fail to raise the stakes like this, through nothing more than a single line of dialogue. It makes Lucien more evil in the most shallow way, And its main purpose isn't to have there be any consequences to the hero, isn't to up the stakes before we get to our confrontation in the tower, isn't to make Lucien more villainous. It's only to give the player more to consider when faced with the three wishes at the end. If you remove this line, what does the game lose? Lucien still killed your sister and is still going to use the Spire. Your dog and Rose are still dead and still worth more than anything to bring back. If anything, this goes too far in making the love wish too appealing, to the point the other two are glaringly poor choices. I've said a few times that the stakes are being artificially raised or that the stakes being introduced are artificial, so to prove my point I want to quickly mention what are good and natural stakes. Lucien appearing here and now, that's a big rise in mistakes, especially as we don't seem to have a weapon. The heroes being taken, that's a big rise in mistakes. Way back, Reaver betraying us, perfectly in character and really great conflict. Bloodstone being attacked, another raise and more conflict we have to directly resolve, that makes sense for all the characters and the plot. The game does have good stakes, it introduces real problems and lets them grow, that is a good part of the story. Getting to the Spire only to find out we have no weapons and no magic, huge point of conflict, and we revel in mistakes of our outcome by being trapped in the Spire for 10 years. When a character shows up out of nowhere, says a single line that should mean more to us than giving up our good looks, but isn't, then that's a problem. Lucien, however, is going to make sure the job is done properly this time, but as he fires, our dog jumps him away and takes the shot for us. This is a great moment. This whole cutscene is like that, some of the best moments and equally some of the worst, all coming within seconds of each other. Because, yes, this is just so our wish of the end can be more valid, but losing the dog is genuinely heart-wrenching. Our dog has been with us for longer than we've had a family. They've been with us from before we were shot, and they were the first one to find us after we'd fallen. They were waiting for us on the Oakfield docks, knowing we were on our way back before even Teresa knew. Our dog died taking a bullet for us, believing it would save us, making the ultimate self-sacrifice. I don't need to go on, you've played the game, you know how shocking and heartrending this moment is. This is the worst thing that can happen to us in this moment, and it hits harder than our family because we see it, directly. Our dog doesn't just disappear and then we're told he's dead. We not only see this, but we feel it too. This is the last thing that happens to us before Lucien puts the gun basically to our head, says this last awesome line, and pulls the trigger.
The last time I killed you, it tore my heart out. Of course, you're only a child. But then, so was I.
And letting Lucien have a final say to show how much he thinks he's grown, that you were a child but so was he, is such good characterization. Lucien kills your family and kills you, he's still single-minded in his goal. All that's changed is his own megalomaniacal need for power. He's still the same man he's always been, whether he believes differently or not. After being shot, the screen goes black and Teresa tells us that death is not your fate, little Sparrow. Exactly as she did the last time we were shot by Lucien. The screen goes white, you're told you're home, and you hear Rose's voice telling you to wake up. You're a child again, somewhere you've never been, about to do things you've never done. Out of everything that happens in this game, the Crucible, saving the heroes, having a family, breaking out of a Spire, fighting alongside the other three, this is still my favourite part of the game. Rose tells you that your parents have gone out before you got to say goodbye, but at least you know they'll be back. You're in a large house on a farm and you've got some chores to do. Rose has set up some bottles for you to shoot, knowing how much you enjoy that. The chickens have escaped their pen and have to be corralled with, what else? A swift kick back to where they belong. And there's some beetles on the vegetable patch that need taking care of. All of those small domestic ways children have of passing the time, of spending their time together, of being normal, and all those little things to keep a life and a family going. This goes beyond the dream that Rose and Sparrow had of finding themselves within Castle Fairfax. That was a dream encapsulating their current situation as homeless orphans. This is the life they could have lived if their parents were still around, if everything had gone the way it should have gone, way back from the beginning. But more, we get to see Rose again, we get to spend time with her and talk to her. I mean, you would normally, you know, the whole silent protagonist thing. We get to talk to her and spend time with her. To do everything that you had ever wanted to do, in dreams that you were never even given a chance to conceive of. It's all here for you now, and it's just the two of you, in this small idyllic patch of homeland. This all started because your sister was taken from you. Every decision you've made and path you've walked down has been to enact vengeance for that one simple act. But here she is, and you can be children again. We have no idea what this place is or what we're doing here, how we got here, if we can ever go back. Teresa told us we aren't dead, but is this our life now? We left Lucien, the Spire, the three heroes, and we go back to the life we should have had so long ago. It doesn't matter. Who cares? Who wants that answer? Just being here is enough without any explanation. Just let it be. Just be with Rose. So you spend the day with your sister, following you around, encouraging you, letting you do all the chores because you're better at it, and you enjoy it. And that's what a good older sibling should do. Keep you safe, keep you encouraged, and keep you happy. And it's enough to just be here with her. We kill the beetles, shoot as many bottles as we can, boot the chickens back into their pen. Eventually, the most perfect day you could ever imagine, and there's nothing more you could want. But it's one day, it was only ever going to be. And at the end of it, you go back to bed. Your parents aren't mentioned again, but I wonder if the reason they aren't here is because they died when Sparrow was too young to form any memories of them. Their whole life is Rose, so while in this dream world their parents are alive, Sparrow physically can't bring them to life here. You're woken in the dead of night by a very particular sound, a single song, one that we heard once before long ago. The music box, playing from beyond the boundary of a farm. Rose tells you it's nothing, to not worry about it, to go back to bed, go back to sleep. But this farm isn't real. This day has only been a dream, and Rose is dead. There are people who need us. Albion needs us. Circumstances that exist outside of this place, wherever or whatever it is. I wish we could say goodbye to Rose. I wish the player character, Sparrow, was allowed to express something, anything. I wish there was some closure given here, some sign of reluctance at having to leave a one place they would never want to leave, that they should never have to leave. We exit the house and we're gone, chasing down the music box, rushing towards the sound. All the while Rose calls to us confused, and then her last heartbreaking plea of "don't go," called out to us like we're breaking a promise we never made. We don't look back. If we do, we'll never go. We only leave. The last thing we hear is the last thing we ever heard from Rose, her scream in the moments before Lucien shot her. I would argue the Fable games are about loss, and they're about building something from that loss. The hero of Oakvale tries to rebuild his family. The hero of Bower Lake builds a method by which they can avenge their dead family, and sticks with Teresa and Hammer. I just thought that maybe the reason I like Hammer so much is because she's the closest we get to the sister that was taken from us. I never realised that until now. Lucien does all of this to bring back his wife and child. These games start with losing our family members and are driven by that loss at every level. We almost never get to see the heroes grieve those they've lost, to feel anything, and I'm stepping out of my analysis shoes here to talk about this. This is just me talking about why I love these games so much, and why this moment means so much to me. Because these games, or at least the narratives, are about loss, but it's hard to appreciate that when we don't see the characters really be affected by that grief. But that's what this is, that's what this scene and this day is. This is the hero's grief made manifest. They're not an adult in this scene. This is them clinging to the last moment they had everything they ever wanted, when everything was perfect. They don't want to be an adult, they don't want to stop Lucien or save the world, or meet Teresa, or have to find the three heroes. They want it to just be the two of them, Sparrow and Rose. This is them reaching out in silence. It's the audience peeking into the inner world of our silent protagonist for the first time and seeing the one thing they could not forget. The one thing they could never let go of that has shaped almost everything about them and how they've lived their life. We see a tableau of how heavily Rose's death is still sitting on them, how they could never outgrow that moment. We never see them in tears, we never see them alone thinking of the past. But we see their perfect day, even though it's been more than 20 years since Rose was alive. And it's nothing grandiose. It's not the houses we own, or the wealth we've built, or the powers we've gained. It's not our family, nor our children. It's the childhood that was taken from you, and the loss of a family member whose murder you were forced to witness. It would be a lie to say that wasn't a personal interpretation. I could be wrong. You, lots of other people, could read this different. This is a test by the music box to deduce if you're worthy of a weapon. Of course the test would be the life you want to leave the least. But I don't think it's entirely that. I think the hero built this world themselves. That the music box saw everything the hero ever wanted, and built this world based on how they felt. All of this is just interpretation, but that's what means the most to me. Maybe I'm reading too deeply into it. Maybe I do that too often. But that's how I enjoy media. And that's why I love video games, because we can interpret things like this differently. Because maybe some people hate this part of the game. We go from mowing down dudes in a cave to hitting beetles with a stick and blasting bottles. Maybe people think this is slow and boring, padding before the final showdown with Lucien, but it's not. And that I get to believe that is why I love this, and why I love this style of storytelling. And even so, if you disagree and hate this, I love that too. I love that for you. You can hate this, you can think it's nothing more than a sweet scene. You can think it's a great callback to your dead sister, or you can think it's an expression of a grief the character never let go of, and that is wonderful. So I can objectively say this is an excellent part of the game and the story, and finally for the main character, but personally it goes deeper than that. And I don't know if I can really talk about this portion of the game without bringing in my biases. Certainly, I can't explain why I think this might be the best part of the game. Anyway, putting my analysis hat back on, back into the story. You wander through this burning path, past dead bodies and ruined buildings, to the music box you bought at the start of all this. The one thing that kicked everything off. That brought you to Castle Fairfax and to Lucien, because it did grant your wish, and that was the worst thing it could ever have done. But this is it, the weapon, the one thing you need to stop Lucien. The music box floats into your hand and the game moves to a cutscene. You, as a child, the music box, Castle Fairfax, Rose, older, Teresa in the Heroes Guild, older again, Hammer mourning her father, the Crucible, the Spire, Bob, the Court of Shadows, Reaver, being shot for a second time. It's so great when games and narratives do this to show us all the things we've done, all the things we've been through, how different we were when we started and how much we've grown, even if that change is strictly physical. This is the best thing that the game can do to draw us to our destined meeting with Lucien here at the end. To show us every decision we had to make, every sacrifice we had to live with, what we lost, what everyone lost, to bring us here to this one moment to earn the music box, and to earn that chance to take down Lucien. A white light and Rose's voice proclaiming that we have passed the test, earned the opportunity to confront Lucien, and the weapon to destroy him. Rose wasn't real, that place wasn't real. Whatever afterlife or purgatory or pocket dimension that was, it was all fueled by the music box, the weapon, an old kingdom artifact. We left it all behind, our perfect world for the good of Albion, and now we get our reward. The chance at Lucien we've been pursuing this entire time and the means to finish him. This is our power. The one thing that separates the hero of Bower Lake from the other heroes and from everyone else. The one thing that their bloodline entitles them to. And the one thing that makes them unique in this story. Being able to claim this music box. We'll talk about this music box in a second. We wake up in the Spire, or appear in there, we're just there. We see Lucien siphoning power from the other three heroes, just as we were in order to gain the weapon at Heroes Hill. Lucien is taking control of the Spire, needing the three heroes to do so to power up the Spire and grant him his wish. He's so close to winning. But it's fine we survive being shot in the head this time. Just like in the beginning, we can't die, because, literally, the game was rigged from the start. Lucien does compliment you, amazed that you cheated death twice, but cheating death feels unimpressive when you can't actually die. We're not cheating death if we're immortal. Although, I suppose if we had stayed in that afterlife and had failed the test, we probably would never have come back and we would have truly died. He tries to put us to sleep, but this time we're protected. Armed with the music box, we can cut his connection to the three heroes. He beseeches us to give up, begs us to think about our actions, then orders us to stop. And only when the three heroes' connections are severed does he try to put us to sleep again, but we've already won. The heroes are saved, Lucien will never use the Spire, and is finally vulnerable. He has a lot of choice words for us, until we shoot him. He falls down the Spire, dead, and Rose avenged. There's no fanfare, there's no drama here, certainly not as much as when he shot Rose and shot you out of a window. You take a single shot and he falls to his death down the Spire. That's everything this tale of vengeance has been leading to. We stopped Lucien from using the Spire, as Teresa said we would, and that's all done. If you take too long though, Reaver will shoot him, so you may not even get that vengeance. We don't even get a good ending that pays off everything we've done, at least not to close out Lucien and our pursuit of vengeance, the one thing that's been driving this game, the one reason for everything we've done. We hold down A to use the music box, take one shot, and we're done. Ostensibly the game is over. An unimpactful ending for an unimpactful villain, and a weak ending to a weak story. Yeah, we'll get to the wishes in a second, let's talk about the music box. The music box represents wishing. We get it to make a wish, the wish is granted, our wish to kill Lucien is granted by the music box, and it eventually leads to us making our one final wish at the end of the game. It also comes back as the weapon that's able to cut off Lucien from accessing the powers of the other heroes and powering up the Spire. Presumably only someone with a strong will connection, maybe even an Archon themselves, can use the Spire. Maybe that's why he needed the three heroes to simulate the powers of Archon. I don't know if it's ever explained exactly what they're needed for, but clearly it's to use the Spire. The Spire can charge up using all the will in the world, but to turn that will into a wish requires a person with a certain set of attributes. While there is some poetry to the music box being the thing that takes out Lucien, and this never feels like a MacGuffin, this whole thing just feels very disappointing. Because you're the fourth hero, the conflicts of all three major hero disciplines, you're the special one. And this is the only thing that makes you special. This is the one thing in the entire game that you and only you can do that makes you important and necessary in this story. I guess it's important you can survive being shot, which sounds so stupid. So the music box, our ability to summon and wield it, is the one thing that brings you unquestionably into the narrative. I cannot say the word unquestionably. I don't know why. That's a few times it's popped up in scripts and I cannot say unquestionably. Unquestionably, I don't know. I hate it. We only need the weapon to depower Lucien because he had already powered up the Spire using the three heroes, and that was protecting him. So if we killed him before he had the three heroes and started trying to siphon them, we wouldn't have needed the weapon and this wouldn't have been a problem. The only thing that makes us special is our ability to claim this weapon, which we only need for a few seconds and in one very, very specific instance that Lucien is invulnerable. And we can appreciate the way Destiny works, that to stop Lucien we need to bring together the three people he needs. He collects none of the heroes but benefits from our hard work swooping in and grabbing them. He gets and loses Garth. Because for as much as this music box is the major thing that only you can do, it's also proof of what you were only ever meant to do. You were never meant to kill Lucien. This confrontation had nothing to do with him trying to kill you, his succeeding at killing Rose, or your desire to kill him. It's only ever about this one instance of making sure Lucien never uses the Spire. It's all about the Spire. That's your role in the game. And while you may have had the internal conflict of wanting to kill Lucien for vengeance, that was never your main role. Summon the music box and make sure that the Spire isn't used by Lucien. The prophecy Lucien read only claims that you will stop him, not necessarily kill him. Teresa only ever tells you equally that you will stop Lucien, that your main goal is the Spire. But it's the most disappointing thing because we do get to kill Lucien. Even if a game doesn't give us a cutscene or a moment to appreciate it, even if it doesn't feel like it, we do technically avenge Rose. The problem with the music box is that even though that's the one thing that makes us integral to the narrative, if Lucien had been killed before this, if we had been able to take him out, this music box wouldn't be necessary. Hell, if we'd have arrived here 10 seconds earlier when Lucien had all the heroes in position, but before he had begun to siphon them, we could have just killed him, music box or no. The one thing that brings the hero into the game and it's almost pointless. Lucien is just a man, we don't need the music box to kill him, only to disconnect him from the Spire. And we only need to do that when he's connected to the Spire, which is this one small moment. That's the only reason in the entire game it has to be us. And maybe you could make a claim that this was Destiny, that it was always ever going to go down at this exact moment, at this exact time. You were only ever going to get to Lucien at the point he starts charging up the Spire. Maybe that was in the prophecy as well, but who can tell? There's just no way of knowing if it was always in the cards that this was the only moment we were ever going to meet Lucien. Why did we need the weapon if Lucien was never going to use the Spire? The weapon doesn't kill him, the weapon just stops him from using the Spire. So if we can get to him before he ever had a chance to use the Spire, what the hell do we need this weapon for? Why did we ever need this? Why was this ever in the plan? Maybe it was a good backup in case we did need it, in case we were too slow and Lucien started charging up the Spire, but if we'd have just kept the heroes in the Chamber of Fate and gone after Lucien, we could have just killed him. We don't need the weapon, so we don't need to be part of this story. Unless it was all part of Destiny, but there's nothing to say that that was ever the case, so I do not accept that as an acceptable answer. With Lucien finally killed, Teresa appears and tells us to take our reward, a single wish from the Spire. We had two big reasons to stop Lucien from using the Spire. The second was because he had gone full tyrant and would make himself supreme overlord of the whole world, spreading his methods of enslavement and unquestioned obedience to all of Albion. But the first and real reason is because we don't know enough about the Spire to know if casting a wish will unleash all the energy stored inside and destroy Albion all over again. This is even what Garth warns him about, that using the Spire will turn the existing world into another bed of ruins to lie over the Old Kingdom. So in all of this discussion of our motivation to take down Lucien, have I missed a huge part of the story? We never primarily needed to stop Lucien to avenge Rose or from taking ultimate power, but to stop him from blowing up Albion as a byproduct of using the Spire. We wanted vengeance, but that was always secondary. But the moment Lucien is gone, Teresa lets you use the Spire, with nary a second thought to the idea that the Spire channeling all of that will could rebound and, well... Because Teresa knows the spire won't explode, and maybe knew that all along. I think there is some more lore about what caused the explosion when the last Archon used the spire, but we don't know that, and that may not even exist in this game. That may be a Fable 3 edition. We only know that the spire has a chance to backfire. Does Teresa know all along that you won't or outright can't blow everything up? Did she know that Lucien would equally never cause the destruction of all of Albion? She's so casual with handing you this wish with zero warning, so she knows it's safe. She must have known it was safe for Lucien too. Teresa does take the spire at the end, casting you all out. Maybe that was the one thing she wanted all along. She wanted Lucien to build the spire, put safety checks in place to make sure he'd never use it, allows you one wish so you'd never come after its power, then kept it to herself. But the main point is this. We stop Lucien so he doesn't blow up the world. Teresa recruits Reaver by convincing him that if everyone dies because Lucien uses the spire, so will he. But now, half an hour after that moment, she lets you use it. Because she knew all along that there was never actually any inherent danger to using the spire. Our main reason for needing to stop Lucien, and it was never actually going to happen. Of course it can be used for evil, but that's the same as any weapon, it falls to the whims of whoever's wielding it. It's clear Lucien's plans would never include total destruction, so while he could have wished to destroy the world, he wants his family and he wants total power. He would never have willingly destroyed Albion, even if he was taking that risk to realise his goals. Although now we know there never was that risk. It could be perhaps that the magnitude of a wish is what would cause the potential backfire, and Teresa stops us from making a wish large enough to cause any destruction, but that's not it. At the beginning of a game when Lucien's ambition is only to bring back 2 deceased family members, we're still told that could cause the spire to blow, so this was an issue before Lucien had more in mind than just bringing back those 2. In 2 of your wishes you bring back more than 2 people, potentially you can bring back hundreds, maybe thousands. Even bringing back your family Rose and the dog is more than 2 people. Or maybe it's because Lucien isn't of a bloodline which makes it dangerous. But the only way for him to use the spire is to simulate our powers with the 3 heroes, which is the closest he can get to emulating the bloodline. And if the Archon blew up the spire, then so can he. If we can use it safely, anyone and everyone can use it safely. We had to stop Lucien from using the spire for a danger that never existed. Worldwide enslavement is bad, but we only knew that was his plan on Hero Hill 2 minutes ago. The last 10 hours of game and 20 years of in-game time, we have needed to stop Lucien from using the spire to stop it blowing up. But it was never going to blow up, and that motivation that's driven us through the game has meant nothing. We do hear Rose's voice telling us to use the spire and not be afraid, which has to be the music box, an Old Kingdom fragment convincing us that everything will be okay. Just because Teresa knows the spire is safe doesn't mean we do, but we hear our sister through the spire, convincing us it's okay to make a wish. You can make 3 wishes. Sacrifice. Everyone killed in the building of a spire will be brought back to life. Love. All our loved ones, our family, Rose, our dog, will be brought back to life. Wealth. Just a boatload of money. Of the 3 wishes, 1 is stupid, 1 is weak, and 1 is painstakingly obvious. You only pick wealth if this is not your first playthrough and you're doing an evil run. Sacrifice is fine, but also somewhat meaningless. This is the best thing for Albion apparently, and the objectively good choice. But none of these people mean anything to us. We don't know any of them. We have no personal investment in their lives or deaths. This isn't a bad choice, it's a good one to be offered, but it pales in comparison to the 3rd choice. To bring back our family, who Lucien just killed. Our sister, whose death started all of this and with whom we just spent a perfect day beyond what we could ever dream. And our dog, who's been by our side since before all of this began. The one character we of course care about the most. Choosing wealth nets you 1 million gold, enough to easily buy the most expensive buildings in Albion and to do whatever you want. Choosing sacrifice, I believe, changes nothing. You ramp up to full good on the morality scale and God personally comes down and shakes your hand. You don't see or meet anyone you saved, I don't think. And love? You get your sister back, your dog back, your family back. But that doesn't mean a single goddamn thing. The outcome of that wish is you are ejected from Aspire back to the Oakfield docks. Your dog is waiting for you, but nothing happens. There's no moment to kneel down and pet him while he jumps all over you. He's just there. There's less fanfare than when you return from Aspire, by which I mean no fanfare. Rose is alive, but she might as well not be. She's not in the game at all. You receive a letter that she was found by someone matching Sife's description, this guy from the first game, who takes her away. You can go and visit your family, but they are no different. They don't say anything about Lucien being killed or being brought back. The game continues as normal, like nothing ever happened. Sorry, did you think there would be an impactful outcome of this choice? The game's already finished, and nothing more happens. This is disappointing to the point of it feeling like a waste of time. And this is why it's so bullshit that Lucien apparently kills our family, because they don't care. The game isn't made any different by our apparently all-powerful wish. If we make another wish, they're gone, and that's the only difference. If we wish them back, nothing has changed. We got a dog back, but okay, why kill him to make the love wish sound like a stronger option when the game does nothing when he returns? They really did just kill him for the wish. But honestly, if he had been alive this whole time we brought back our family and Rose, this would have been exactly the goddamn same. This game is only different if you choose the other wishes, and that's great, you get to stew in the consequences of your decision, but not choosing an outcome shouldn't be more impactful than the outcome we did choose. By which I mean there's more impact to our love decision if we don't choose it. The choices we don't make shouldn't be more impactful than the one that we did. How is the most impactful decision the worst one that gives you all the money? I'd say this one gives you the most gameplay impact but the least story impact. But the other two wishes don't give you a single story impact either, so you might as well pick the option that allows you to make the most of the endgame. I cannot believe the game would funnel you this hard into making a single decision, because that's why the game makes it so clear our family is dead, our dog is shot before us, we get a day with Rose to tease what could have been, and then it does absolutely nothing to make that wish worth the thought we put into it. Sacrifice is nothing more than turning the game back to a previous save state, before the Spire when we had our family, dog and Rose is dead. That's the outcome of our great endgame wish, that nothing has changed. It just makes the game exactly as it was before we got to Heroes Hill. And that's the best wish. And the only reason we had to make that wish was because the game rushed to undo what we'd built throughout the game in a cheap, meaningless one-liner. At least the dog died being a hero. Do you see why I'm so annoyed at Lucien killing our family off screen, why it's cheap? It takes them away from us just to waste a wish on bringing them back so nothing in the game has changed. Sure, this gives the other two options more consequences, but those wishes are still also awful. This is great on paper, the wishes are cool as hell. I get coming away from this feeling like we've done something huge using the Spire, that we've changed the world, but we goddamn haven't. I'm so furious with how terrible the outcome of this wish is that it makes me almost want Lucien to win. We get our family back, why couldn't Lucien? He was never going to blow up the Spire. If the game hadn't just had to quickly insert that he wants to become overlord of the whole world, Lucien would have been fine. I mean, the whole slave thing, but whatever. I could honestly keep on going, and I don't think that would be enough catharsis to come to terms of how bad these wishes are, and the awful nothing outcome of a choice the game wants us to go with. I understand the developers didn't want to bring Rose back and do the whole reunion, but then why make it an option? Why make it feel like we got our sister back, that we would get to live a life with her, only for her to be in the game exactly as much as when she was dead? Why can't we get one of those cool cutscenes to at least let the hero meet her and then explain that she's gone, that she has to leave? Why is it just this letter? Once the wish is cast though, at least we get this gorgeous cutscene of a Spire powering up and casting our wish. This does look absolutely awesome. One of the three heroes will agree with the wish you made. Revo will congratulate you if you take the money, Hammer will side with you if you choose sacrifice and bring everyone back, and Garth will understand if you choose to bring back your loved ones, though Hannah will berate you for it, which is sort of unfair from Hammer, especially after how her personality is built. She lost her father and it's difficult to believe she would begrudge us the decision to bring back our sister and dog and our family. She even says she'd be tempted to bring back her father, but ultimately she would have chosen to bring back the multitude of people. This is just about the only time in the game she doesn't fully support you, and it feels like that's only because the game wanted the three heroes to represent one of the three wishes. Even though Hammer did lose close family, and Garth was in Spire for 10 years and must have seen lots of people die, so this feels the wrong way around. Garth should support the sacrifice wish, and Hammer should support the love wish. Now that Lucien is dead, the Spire is safe, and the job of the four heroes is complete, it's unclear what any of them should do. Hammer says she will go north to train with the warrior monks there, a satisfying compromise between her two lives. Garth will return to his homeland of Samarkand, and Reva decides to join him, having never visited and sensing new victims for whatever predation takes his fancy. The three heroes bid us their goodbyes as Teresa teleports them out of Aspire one by one, Hammer last. This is the final touching moment of the game, which is a shame to come after Hammer dug into you quite hard.
I know why we got attacked in the cave the day we met. You brought those hollow men in with you. 2 monks would have found nothing, but a warrior finds battle, always.
Which is fairly scathing, and for this to follow that shows a small lack of thought in the writing. For Hammer to flip from outright condemning us to leaving with such a heartfelt goodbye. But these 2 moments are both true enough to Hammer that it's not entirely out of character or too far out of left field.
It's not like I'm leaving much behind. Well, maybe one thing. About the greatest friend I ever had. But it's time to say goodbye. Take care of yourself.
Which is so gratifying to hear from a relationship we put the most time into and the person we spent the most time with. This is a perfect send-off for Hammer and the perfect recap of their relationship, what good friends they've made over the course of the game. At least it's implied that's the case, being a silent protagonist makes it tricky to pin down. There's nothing unlikable about Hammer though, not really, so I expect a lot of people are going to feel the same way. Even if your favourite character is Reva, this is still the best goodbye and the only relationship that's worth acknowledging like this, with a real heartfelt goodbye. Lastly, Teresa turns to us and says this.
The world is yours to enjoy, but the spire is mine. Be gone.
Which is all kinds of ominous. There are a lot of rumours going around that Teresa caused all of this to get her here to the spire, but the game needed to do more if they wanted that to be the case. Teresa has always been there to support and guide us, and nothing more. To turn around and say everything she did was just to get us here and get the spire into her hands is more than we can believe given how the game played out. This is a sincerely ominous line, but not intended as a reveal that Teresa has been working to her own ends this whole time. I might be wrong, and I do wonder if I plan to do something else with Teresa that this was setting up, but that isn't the case here. I take this as more of her taking a caretaker role over the spire to ensure no one else will use it. This line is ominous in how it's delivered, and maybe Teresa always wanted to take the spire for herself if she got the chance, but that doesn't mean getting you here was for that sole purpose. She wanted to do what she could to save the world first and foremost, and while Teresa remains an enigmatic character, she's still the overseer of this bloodline. Don't forget Teresa is Sparrow and Rose's distant aunt, and one of the few people able to protect Albion from any danger. I see her more as Gandalf, unable to aid directly but guiding and supporting those who can, than Saruman. There is evidence to support Teresa masterminding all of this, but I can't go into all of that here because I think it would be too much, and this video is already too long without going into alternative reads on the story. Another reason to give us the wish is so that no one else could dive in and use its powers if they were able to collect the 3 heroes. This way no one picks up where Lucien left off, at least not until the spire recharges, but Teresa will be there when that happens. Although saying that does come with the acknowledgement that you and she are the only 2 living inheritors of a bloodline, and as such, the only 2 who can use the power of Aspire alone. Oh wait, no, Rose is alive, she can use Aspire, woo. So there's the game and the story. We are removed from Aspire, arriving back at the Oakfield docks. We have won no difficult battles. It doesn't feel like we saved the world, though we stopped the world from needing saving at all, so I guess that counts. There was no huge antagonistic force out to thwart or stop us. You'd think normally that being killed would be a setback, but even death in this narrative is meaningless. Just to recap our role in this story. The game does nothing to make you central to recruiting the 3 heroes. The one thing you are needed for to summon the weapon is only useful in one very specific instance if Lucien begins to charge at the spire. Before and after that he is entirely vulnerable as any normal man. The entire game is to get revenge on Lucien, which we may not even get, and when we do, we don't get anything for it. He just falls to his death without a cutscene, without a single moment, nothing to imply that anything significant has been achieved. There's as much fanfare to killing Lucien as a hob running off a cliff. The entire game is about stopping Lucien using the spire and potentially unleashing a cataclysmic force on the world, but we get to use the spire, proving none of that was ever going to happen. And we get to make a wish that undoes every bad thing ever done to us, and it makes no difference unless you don't bring your dog back, which, I guess that's good. Our sister isn't in the game, we only receive a letter, and the people of Albion don't care either way. The game's already finished.
And now it is time for you to leave. The world is yours to enjoy.
Not until this moment did I imagine I'd come down this hard on the story, not even when I played through it. It's very easy to look at the story and characters like this and remove them from the frame of the game and the gameplay, which is what this channel and this analysis is about. It's intended to be just about breaking down the story, but that does nothing to account for the rest of the game. What I mean is that even though the tone of this analysis has been such a negative one, that's only looking at it as a fraction of the whole game. I can come away sounding so negative, more negative than I feel, I think, while still having a great impression of the game overall, to love so much about the whole game whilst actually playing it. And that's really important, that matters a whole lot. Being hard on the story is not a criticism on the game as a whole, as it exists as a single cohesive adventure, only on a small fraction of it. There are aspects of this narrative that do deserve to be viewed so negatively, but those never affect the overall gameplay or experience, nor are they enough to drag this story down entirely into it being awful. Sometimes it's really good, sometimes it's pretty bad, so it's just fine. Replaying the game just to record the footage, I had such a blast with it. The game itself is fun and enjoyable with an unquestionably great presentation. The game is as good as everyone says it is, even if the story and protagonist are often lacking. But the story's main impetus is to get us from one place to another, from one character to another, to side quests and new jobs and dangerous enemies. At that, the game and the story succeed unquestionably, so the game as a whole is great. As a piece of fiction driven by an active, forceful protagonist with nuance, I want to point something out that I think covers how this game approaches its story and priorities very well. I think this goes some way to explaining how we can have great characters in a weak story, and in a story that never felt like a priority. Or it certainly never felt like a priority to bring the main character into the story. Everything Lucien did is for one goal: to bring back his wife and child from the dead. The events of the game are launched by that need, they're driven by that need, the whole game centres around that one thing. Even when Lucien starts wanting more than that, he still wants to bring his family back. I talked about how we maybe only get to use the Spire because our wish is smaller than Lucien's, but that isn't true. Perhaps the game wants us to believe there's a high cost for bringing back people from the dead, but that is not the case, and that is proven in this game directly. There is a very small cost for bringing people back from the dead. I know that because there is a quest in this game to bring back Lady Grey from the dead, even though she's been dead for 500 years. And she was cut into 3 pieces. Victor Frankensteins her back to life after 500 years. Why in ever-loving hell does Lucien need an Old Kingdom spire to do something arguably much less impressive than this random creep in his basement? The game never says what killed Helena or Amelia, only that they were killed by a mysterious illness, which is much harder to cure than being trisected. At no point did the developers stop to think that in a story about needing a 1,000-year-old construction of magic and technology, built by a forerunner culture, powered by the most powerful being of the time, that maybe having someone brought back to life by mere electricity was a good idea that wouldn't undermine the entire point of the game's main plot. And I think that tells us how much they thought about the story. The focus was all on the characters, and in that they succeed. For the plot, for Lucien, there's a lot to be desired. Of course there's a case to be made that this, as the first one, isn't a game that's meant to be held to this level of narrative scrutiny, but the way the other characters are expertly handled and expertly written prove that isn't the case. The writers really wanted to do something great with this narrative, and in many ways they succeeded. They honestly did, despite everything. I cannot make it clear enough how phenomenal all 3 heroes are at every single level and every moment they're in the story. And the same is true for Lucien for the 2 small scenes he gets to be in. The developers wanted every character to shine, and they do, but that's not enough to save the entire story. Some of that effort should have gone into the hero of Bower Lake. I remember Christmas morning 2008 coming downstairs to my presents and being told that I could not open the largest box till last. I had no idea what it could be. Mum wasn't watching me too closely when I opened a present, and I was holding Fable 2 for the Xbox 360, and I knew, despite my wildest hopes, what was in the big box I had to save till last. This game is special to me and to thousands of other people, for that memory and for hundreds of others. I said in the Fable 1 analysis that the game prioritised other elements of that game over the story, and that feels quite true here. It feels like they did try a lot harder with the story, and that shows in a lot of places. but they had combat, a new magic system, and the economy in mind before the story. Above all of that, they had the expression system and the player's interaction with the hero, plus the dog. So while the story is more of a priority here than in Fable 1, they had so many other distractions the story just doesn't come together. And Fable 2 does, for the most part, have a story that is overall serviceable. It's a story where even if a narrative is slightly lacking, the characters absolutely drive it, which wasn't true for Fable 1. Not saying that Fable 1 was worse for its lack of strong characters, or that this is necessarily a better story than the first game because of just its characters. What Fable 2 lacks in having a main character unnecessary in their own narrative, or anything really driving any personal conflict, it makes up for in having incredible characters at every level and at every stage of a game, and that goes a long way to keeping this story afloat. I wrote the plot might be air. I think the plot is lacking, but when it's good, it's very good. There's good conflict there, there's a lot that drives the plot itself, just that we never feel like we're particularly drawn into those events. So the plot might be hit and miss, but the writers obviously wanted really strong characters who stand out from one another, and the game is excellent for that. It would be great if Reaver had been in the game for longer just to get a better feel for him, but the game really eats up those few moments it has, making him stand out as a fan favourite even when he's in the game the least. It's not even a setback we get so little of Reaver, because the writers are so effective with what little time they had. The game prioritises those characters to the detriment of a main player character, but they do such a good job with the thing they set out to do that it almost makes up for it. For as negative as this may sound, I just have to remember how delightful it was to hear Hannah singing before we even met her, how satisfying it is to finally break out of a spire with Garth, and how Reaver is such a perfect asshole we can't help but love him. And the story honestly feels great in those moments. There's so much to love about this story, and that's the story the designers wanted us to focus on. So there's no part of me that comes away from this outright hating the story. I strongly dislike aspects of it, but the overall impression it leaves is still great. It's just an issue with analysis that it can come away sounding more negative than I actually feel. Meeting and spending time with Hammer is an absolute delight in this game. She's such a wonderfully written character, and she gets to express her grief without the game shying away from that, something the previous game struggled with and even this game at times doesn't nail. We spend less time with Garth, and he's the least engaging of the three. His conflict with Hammer is sourceless and doesn't go anywhere. But as a character by himself, he carves out his own niche amongst the heroes and the cast of characters in this game, and his history with Lucien does a lot to make him interesting and to bring him into the story and our conflict of wanting to stop Lucien. Teresa unfortunately suffers, relegated to exposition and guide, ruining many key moments of a game that would otherwise be far more enjoyable. She's not in the game a huge amount, and when she's there in person, in the Chamber of Fate recruiting the heroes, she's a great character. It's a real testament to the writing team that characters all across the board can express so much with so few lines, and when Teresa isn't expositing, that's absolutely true for her. The game makes the most of what little runtime the characters can have before the action needs to start, and they should absolutely be applauded for that. It's a real shame the main character is such a nobody in their own story, not being dragged through the narrative in any real significant way, and only being given the most shallow, unsatisfying vengeance at the end. The majority of choices in this game are also not greatly impactful. There are some choices that really do give us pause, and those are absolute standouts in this entire game and story. Bob, Elizabeth, they give us real difficult choices, but it would be great if there was more like that. We don't make a single choice, I don't think. From when we're orphans in the slums and had to choose who to give a warrant to, up to choosing to obey or disobey the commandant in the spire. That's the entirety of recruiting the hero of strength that we're given no impactful choices in the main story. Oh, we get to free these prisoners or let the bandits keep them, that's it. But there's more than enough here to love within the game itself that the story doesn't strictly drag down. What the story wants to accomplish, it manages to do so, and it does so to great effect. The combat in this game is satisfying. The first time my character threw up her sword and then caught it and turned that into a swing was magic. And the magic itself looks and feels great to use. Albion is a delight to explore with some of the most beautiful locations that made me stop and want to get lost. A feeling I haven't personally had in any game for literal years. There's still a lot of charm and personality here. That's clear in the main characters and in the NPCs, in every town we walk through and everyone we meet. This is still Fable and the best Fable has to offer. A deep dive in the narrative doesn't change that. Lucien can be a poor antagonist, but he challenges the hero of Bower Lake in the ways they need to be challenged. The Crucible is good fun, The Spire is a change of pace for the game. Wraithmarsh and Bloodstone are dripping with mood and atmosphere. It's delightful to have Teresa back after the first game. It's fantastic to spend more time in Albion, and nothing is ever going to change that or make that less true. The story could have been stronger in places, but it's never so bad it negatively affects the overall experience, while giving us every opportunity to engage in and fall in love with all the incredible things the game offers to elevate that experience. And really, that's the mark of a bad story, but a great game.